Everyone, this is ring announcer Thomas Triber. And now, ladies and gentlemen, the time has arrived for Inside Boxing Weekly. So here are your hosts, Mike Goodpaster, John Einreinhofer, and Jeremiah Preisser on the Grueling Truth Sports Network.
Welcome, everybody, to Inside Boxing Weekly on the Grueling Truth Sports Network. Inside Boxing Weekly is brought to you by our friends at the Retired Boxers Foundation, Alex Ramos, Jackie Richardson. You can find them on Facebook. And also, of course, mybookie.ag. You can go to mybookie.ag, put in the promo code TGT100, and bet on some fights with odds that are 10 million to 1. So make sure you do that, and you get a first deposit bonus of 100% up to your first $300 deposit. Or to make it even easier, you could go to thedruellycroof.com and click on the banner at the top of the page to get the same bonus. I am your co-host for Inside Boxing Weekly, Mike Goodpaster, and I want to welcome in my co-host. First up, Jeremiah Preisser.
What's up, John? What's up, Mike? Hey, I like that intro, man, when you talk about you can bet on fights that are 10 million to 1. I mean, boxing is not really a sport where
you can just go throw $1 on the underdogs all year, and if you hit one of them, you've made money.
Yeah, exactly. So take our advice. Go sign up and get it done.
All right.
Or another suggestion. Oh, go ahead, Mike.
John, you have to be introduced before you speak. Come on now. We've done this for a long time. And, of course, our resident lawyer from New Jersey, West Virginia, and basically he is known as the greatest lawyer in Appalachia, John Einreinhofer. How you doing, John?
Thanks, Mike. Good to be here.
Hell, I forgot PBC. You work for the PBC, too.
That's right. See, I'm a jack of all trades. But I want to say on the MyBookie AG point that you and Jeremiah made, another recommendation is, with all these no-hoper fights we talked about and there's odds on, there couldn't be a better time to parlay because you can go 10 for 10.
No, because actually when the odds are that long, they won't let you parlay.
Sometimes they will, and actually you can get the odds down a bit. I'm surprised. I got to admit, I'm surprised at that. Not that it's easy. We don't want to give them any ideas to make it even tougher, but you can parlay some of these, and you're not facing a real lot of risk to at least get your odds lower. I've tried to make up for some of these no-hoper disasters by doing that some, and that's reasonably effective, except for the Jared Hurd fight. That was not a
and the bad thing is, Bobby Sheridan, who does the Sheridan Report, called me and he said, "Should I bet this?" And I thought about it, and I thought, "What the hell? It's like 9 or 10 to 1 at least." And then at the end, I said, "Nah, because if it's a decision, they probably won't let him win anyways." And then what happens? And then Bobby calls me after, and he says, "Damn it! If you'd have just told me to do it, we'd have made a lot of money tonight."
Yeah.
What the hell?
All right, there's still tricks.
All right, so let's do this because I've been excited to talk about this. This is one of the greatest fights I've ever seen. Billy Joe Saunders became the WBO World Super Middleweight title as he beat Shifat Asufi, who was the #1 ranked contender. John, this has to be a fight that'll go down with Ali Frazier 1.
Yeah, somehow I'm almost embarrassed to say it. I watched this fight. I'm taking advantage of all this modern technology in boxing being available that some people are bragging about, and this is the downside of it. I'm watching the zone and this at the same time, and the Billy Joe Saunders Sufi fight was just dreadful. Saunders was out of shape. You could see that just by looking at him, and Sufi brought nothing, and it went 12 rounds. So what more can you say except for the fact that this was an alphabet title fight, and we say it time and time again. We've literally now been saying it for years. How can anybody take the alphabet organizations seriously?
There's plenty that do. I found out in the last week.
There are, and it's getting worse. Somehow it's getting worse. It's bizarre. I agree, and that's why I say it, because that's one of my biggest frustrations in the last few years is the fan base. Unlike old days, actually, a lot of them buy into this stuff. So we plead with you. Look at this. This was a WBO Super Middleweight World Championship.
Does that mean they're the World British Organization? Because I think they created this just so the Brits could act like they had world champions.
Yeah, and they're talking about the fight seriously. I mean, how could anybody in their right mind think that this was a title fight, especially when you watched it? And Saunders was out of shape. Yeah, he's fighting at 168 pounds, but he's making the weight. But you could just look at him; he wasn't in shape. And I've never said he doesn't have talent. He has some talent. He's overly cautious, probably, for the talent he has. And then he has these these boring performances a lot. And who knows how it's going to all end up playing out for him. But this was a joke. Let's face it.
All right, Jeremiah, is it just my imagination, or does Billy Joe Saunders look a little like a 52-year-old meth head?
Lives in a trailer park at that. Well, I mean, I don't know what they got in the UK that resembles the trailer park. I don't know if they've got something similar, but yeah, man, he does. I mean, he looks like he's about to go to AA meetings and professes his himself to a higher being, and wean himself off. I mean, the dude just doesn't look like he takes care of himself. He's just not particularly good looking. I mean, like John said, and I've seen some people say, hey, Billy Joe Saunders, he's big for 160. He probably belongs at 168. Honestly, he doesn't. I mean, he
just belongs there because he can't get his fat ass any lower.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, it just looked like he was there because he wasn't dedicating himself to his craft. And there's been constant question marks around it. I mean, I really haven't heard any rumors about his work ethic, but when you look at the amount of times that he's pulled out of fights or the amount of times that he's fighting in general, he just doesn't seem like a guy who's taking it all that seriously. And then he wants to, he wins some stupid alphabet trinket, and then he calls guys out like, I'd give Gennady Golovkin an opportunity to be a quote-unquote two-time or a two-weight world champion. I mean, honestly, I don't want any of those guys to take the bait because I just don't think he's worth the time. I mean, yeah, he's going to sell okay, but it's just like when guys don't dedicate themselves to their profession, I don't want to see, somebody reap the rewards for it. I mean, it's just, when you're only working maybe 2 times a year, don't give the guy, millions and millions of dollars for stuff like this. I mean, but it's got to be said, back to John's point, Saunders is a talented guy. I've got to give him that. But really, he's resting his resume on a win over David Lemieux. If this was, 40 years ago, all Billy Joe Saunders would be is a contender, right? He'd be a top 10 guy.
Maybe. Do you think he'd be a top 10 guy if this was 20 or 30 years ago, though?
He'd be a top 10. He'd be a top 10
I
fighter,
think so.
I think, yeah.
You think so? Even though he's never beaten anybody to prove anything?
Listen, the thing, it's hard to, put yourself in those positions, right? It's impossible to say. I do think he's talented enough, but maybe if he was fighting 34 years ago, maybe he's got a tougher mentality and he's actually training his ass off. I think he has a talent to do good things. But again, here's my problem is he's obviously not getting himself in shape, and he's having Frank Warren doing him political favors. I mean, the fact that BoxRec, I get it, BoxRec is not always a good gauge as to where somebody rates, but whenever you get past the top 20, it is a pretty accurate reflection of how good these guys are. And Shif Adesoufi was not even the best guy fighting out of Germany in his own weight class. I think he was top 5 maybe.
He was ranked third in his own hometown, wasn't he?
Yeah. I mean, he's ranked third in his own household. He's got 2 bigger brothers who've been kicking the shit out of him for 25 years. But no, I mean, the thing about it is he's not a world-class fighter. He's not anything near it. And the fact that he's even able to fight for it, again, it's all politics, man. To call a guy like this a world champion is absurd.
All right, next up we had a fight card that was actually a decent card. We had the World Boxing Super Series out of Glasgow, Scotland. Ivan Barancek against Josh Taylor. Josh Taylor won the fight, I thought, in clear fashion. I mean, Josh Taylor looked good in this fight, and it sets up a great matchup with Regis Prograis. Jeremiah.
Yeah, it does. I mean, I think the World Boxing Super Series is something we should all look forward to. I mean, yeah, you're not always getting the best versus the best, but sometimes it's not always the people setting it up. Like the people who are putting the brackets together, they're getting almost no assistance from American promoters, and so they're not able to fill it out as well as we would like. But given that, we're still getting some damn good matchups, and it's better than what we're getting outside of the tournaments. I mean, just about nobody is putting on this level of fights this consistently. So I look forward to it each and every time. And, in regard to the Taylor and Baranchyk fight, Taylor was good. I mean, he was better all around than Ivan Baranchyk was. Baranchyk, kept going after him, getting dropped a couple times, and one was from a nice right hook from Josh Taylor, but it was pretty close. I mean, obviously I thought Taylor won. The scorecards were pretty close to what I saw, but Taylor, I think, has to improve his outside game if he wants to beat somebody like Regis Prograis. But when that fight happens, I mean, it might be the best fight of the year. Prograis looked damn good. Taylor's good. We're talking about two guys who are at or near their prime, and they're getting themselves now, in a tournament format. I really, really like it. I mean, we just don't see enough of this in boxing. And again, I think it's just real cool to see. I just wish other people would follow suit.
All right. Jeremiah or John, you agree?
I have mixed emotions about the WBSS. I'm with everybody else where, I think, and I'm not saying Jeremiah, but I think some people, they get the concept confused with what's actually taking place. I'm with everybody else where I like the idea. I mean, obviously, if we could have a tournament of all the best guys, for me, it would be with only 8 or 9 weight classes. That's one thing. And I know we've got enough problems as it is to even get good guys fighting each other's tough enough, but that would be ideal. And then, in these tournaments, we've had 8 where really it hasn't been 8 good guys. You get mismatches in the early rounds. In almost all these tournaments, you haven't had any really particularly worthy early round matchups. There haven't really been that many good fights in these tournaments either. As a result of that, but getting to this fight, I thought Taylor's for real to me. I mean, he looked good almost throughout the whole fight. This was a fight that really played out pretty much exactly the way I thought it would. The only part for me that didn't play out the way I thought it would was, I don't remember exactly what round it was. It was right before Taylor got Baranchyk into the serious trouble when he started dropping him. It seems like he just kind of laid back for a little bit, and he was letting Baranchyk come on and land some shots, and looked like that it was troubling him a little bit, but that was the only part of the fight. I'm with you, Mike. I thought he won the fight clearly. I don't think there was any doubt at all there. I dropped Baranchyk twice. Baranchyk's what I thought he was. Like I said, I really liked him a lot coming up, but
he's just a good, tough fighter, and that's about it.
Yeah, right. The more I watched him, I cooled on him. He's not that talented. I mean, when he really started out, I thought he was this talented power guy who was tough. He's a tough guy, and, he fights to win. As I said last week, I like watching the guy fight. I liked watching him fight Saturday. I liked watching Taylor and Baranchyk. But I thought Taylor clearly won the fight. I mean, Taylor's a talented guy. I still favor Prograis slightly over him. I picked Prograis from the beginning, but that fight's not a gimme, either way. I still lean towards Prograis. I think he's going to be a little bit of a favorite, but this is one where it's close where, it wouldn't shock me if Taylor won that fight. I mean, Taylor's got a good height advantage on Prograis, and I think, frankly, people get into stereotypes in terms of, I think Prograis is a little bit better, but, Prograis doesn't bring any specific real talent better than Taylor. In other words, Taylor's got hand speed, power, he's got height. I think Prograis just slightly better all around and punches just a bit harder, but it's close. They both, what makes me curious about that matchup, they both work the body real well, especially for younger guys. So they really work the body and they do it well. And that's going to be an interesting part of when they fight. So that, that interests me. But again, with this tournament, I mean, you could have, to me, you could have, again, and you could have, we could have just made Prograis Taylor from the beginning. It's who you thought was going to be there, and you're, in a way, to me, you're still delayed. I really like this fight more for not the 140-pound stuff, both of these guys are going to see where the money is. There's all those guys at welterweight that are money generating and bigger names. And I think both of these guys, which I think is a good thing, unlike some people might, I think they're headed for that. Probably both of them after this fight. And this to me is a good entryway fight for that. To me, even though it's at 140 pounds, it really shows to me who's going to be another top contender at 147 pounds, the winner, and maybe even the loser if they perform well enough.
All right.
Yeah, and I wanted to piggyback off something he said real quick when he talked about how well they body punch. I thought that was actually one of the things I was thinking about during the fight. And when John talked about how Baranchyk bothered Taylor a little bit, I was actually kind of concerned at how often Baranchyk was getting to Taylor's body. I mean, because he was unleashing some combinations. I mean, he wasn't doing anything special. It wasn't like some Mickey Ward tap to the head, tap to the body. But he was banging Taylor's body quite a bit. And, again, he couldn't drop him or anything. But it just made me look at it and say, hey, if I'm Regis Prograis, that's what I'm going to be doing, come fight time. I'm going to be focusing on that body because Taylor's a little susceptible there.
Yeah, and my opinion is this. I think Prograis will take Taylor apart. I think Prograis is on a different level than Taylor. Put it like this, Prograis is a guy that I think can move up to welterweight and compete and possibly beat most everybody there. I don't think Taylor has that kind of talent. I think he's a really talented guy. I just don't think he's on that level that Prograis is on.
Well, and I think you might be right. I mean, it's possible. My thing is, I'm still wanting to see, because Taylor looks like an all-around good fighter to me. I just need him to work behind the jab more consistently. But you might be right. I mean, the ease at which Prograis took apart Relic is a good fighter. But I'm personally not exactly sure if he's on another level yet, only because Prograis looks to me like he's technically better than Josh Taylor. He kind of seems like he might have that it factor. But I also wanted to add in real quick, and John can take this, but, not necessarily the last part of this, but it would be interesting to see, Josh Taylor move up, and if Josh Kelly, continues to progress, you could have some big UK fight over there, but maybe you want to touch on the earlier part, John.
Yeah, well, I like Taylor better than Kelly. I think Taylor's got pop. I think his pop will carry up enough to welterweight. I just think that he, might have to be. I thought, like a Baranchyk, he could have been more aggressive and probably stopped him, but he didn't do it. And I thought that. I said it on last week's show going in. Yeah, but in that one round, I did think that. Taylor was bothered in that one round, one or so. That's the only thing that did worry me about him in that fight. I think Prograis is a bigger puncher. Prograis is a huge puncher, and Prograis got that real good head movement. He's very aggressive, but he can come at you with good head movement and be aggressive at the same time. That's one of his strengths. So I think I like Prograis in the matchup, but I do think Taylor's talented, and he's got solid size even for fighting at welterweight, 147 pounds. Prograis is a shorter guy, but I do think Prograis will be a factor at 147, like Mike said. I think he's going to end up fitting in right there with those guys. That'll be exciting. But I think Taylor's got enough talent that he might be able to be there too, but just maybe be a little bit back because you're going to have a log jam. But like you said, Jeremiah, you got Josh Kelly's out there too, and maybe there could be a big UK fight down the road with that. But I think Taylor's going to be around as a factor for a while.
All right, next up, we have Inoue knocks out Emmanuel Rodriguez in 2 rounds. Me and Jeremiah touched on this a little bit last night. So, John, I'm going to start off with you. How impressed were you, number 1? And number 2, do you think Inoue is a top 5 pound-for-pound boxer?
I was really impressed. I've really gotten to like watching Inoue fight. I'm not crazy about the pound for pound list like a lot of people are. I mean, I don't mind people doing. Hey, it's just.
How about this
then?
How about
anyway,
this? Would you put him on a list of elite fighters?
Yeah, he is, and when and anybody that's going to argue for him top 5 pound for pound, the way he's taking care of business, I wouldn't. he's not like a guy that would bother me. Like, and I'll say it on the show straight out if there's something that I see that I'm like, hey, there's no way. I don't really have a problem with it, but I think since we have said this at the time it went on, and we've been doing this show for a long time, and I was really impressed with Inoue. I love the performance. I love when a guy, even if it's a fight maybe he should win, and then he really takes care of business decisively like that.
Yeah, the thing is,
like
Rodriguez is a solid fighter. It's not like he's,
right.
Shifat Asufi or Dominic Brazil.
Yeah, well, Asufi is, he's not even anywhere near a top 10. Brazil's been legit top 10s before at 10.
He's not a legit top 10 anything, but he might be in a bad division because he's never beaten anybody.
But Rodriguez is a solid fighter. Yeah, I was really impressed by Inoue's performance. He's bringing a lot of excitement. I like that. Just taking guys out like he has, 1 round, 2 rounds, guys that are solid fighters. That's exciting. But what I was getting back to, we've been doing the show a long time. Like Jeremiah was pointing out, and I agreed with, I like the guys getting into the traditional division, and Inoue went up to bantamweight. But, I'm not saying Inoue's not going to beat these guys, maybe blow them out. But the fights, this is, again, where to me this WBSS doesn't fully work with all the weight classes and stuff. The fights really for him were Estrada and Sorung Visai. And I'm not saying maybe he doesn't blow those guys out. And now another fight would be Neri. These are not the guys he's fighting, and I'm a believer in Inoue's talent. I'm not questioning his ability, but he's not he's blowing out solid fighters, which is great, but I don't think he's really been in like the real test fight. And for a guy that's now getting as touted as he is, that's sort of the missing piece there. And again, is Nonito Donaire going to do that? A 35-year-old guy who's well past his prime, who hadn't even been fighting at bantamweight for years, until he gets a guy who quits on him in the first round, and then he gets an injury substitute in the second round. And so we got a minus 5,000 favorite in Inoue in the WBSS final. Is that what we want tournaments?
Well, the one thing we do get, is Inoue does get hit, and there is a question because he hasn't really fought a puncher. I think Donaire still carries that power. Maybe he can get lucky like that, but overall, I agree. I don't think Nonito Donaire has a chance except for a lucky punch. Jeremiah, what's your take on Inoue? Make it real quick because a lot of people heard you talk last night about it.
Yeah, they did. They did. But there are probably a lot of people who did, are listening.
Okay, you can take a little more time though.
Well, no, but I think John is right. And again, I don't know. I'm not rubbing elbows with promoters or managers or any of that. But I still wonder why Inoue didn't fight Donnie Nietes at 112, why he didn't fight Rung Visai or Estrada at 115. And again, I don't like the extra divisions either. I really don't. But we do, again, we have to acknowledge that these guys are working within that framework. So I don't know. Can somebody tell me? Again, I don't know these guys. I don't know the promoters. But why did he not fight either one of those guys? Because, Nietes is on the pound-for-pound list for the Ring Magazine. Estrada is, I think, number 7 or number 8 now. For them, Estrada's on Transnational's pound-for-pound list. Rung Visai was. I'm just wondering why he missed those guys in particular. Like, were they fights that he couldn't get? Some guy was not interested, or I just would like to see how that would play out, because I feel like if somebody else had done that, if Terrence Crawford, just Lomachenko had skipped 130 and Mikey Garcia was there and he went to 135, I think a lot of people would probably be giving him flack for not, why would you do that? So again, I'm not accusing anyone of ducking. I'm not saying any of that. I just have questions as to why it never happened.
Yeah, because we don't know who's ducking who, too, because he may have wanted to fight, and those promoters for the other guys wouldn't do it.
Yeah, exactly. So I'm not getting accusatory. I don't really know, but it just seems when you have guys at that level, why are you not trying to get the fights, or what exactly happened? Again, but in terms of talent, Inoue looks like the real deal. From the eye test, I mean, he's got speed. He's got big power. His timing is very good. He understands the jab well. Technically, he's rock solid.
But
I mean,
it's
there's
safe
a
to
lot
say
to
this,
like
Jeremiah, and we brought it up last night, though. He hasn't fought a big puncher, and he hadn't fought a real slick boxer yet either.
No, he hasn't. And again, I also caution people to, and I know John saw this because he liked my tweet on Twitter today. We also have to pump the brakes. There's some hardcore boxing people behind Inoue, and that's fine. I mean, we're all for dissenting opinions. I mean, we released an article on the website itself arguing for Inoue's place atop the pound for pound. I don't mind that. I'm open for this sort of discussion. But my problem is a lot of the focus is on where these guys were ranked when Inoue beat them. Like, oh, well, Taguchi ended up being the ring's 108-pound champion. Okay, well, what does that mean to me? When the divisions are thinner below 126, and Taguchi himself lost to Heki Budler in his first championship defense. I mean, Budler is nowhere near an elite fighter. He's a good fighter. He's got good work rate, whatever. Right? He beat Omar Navarez, who was number one at 115. Well, the division was weak as hell. Navarez had been, building his resume off a lot of soft defenses, and we saw his cap years back when he fought Nonito Donaire and fought to survive. He didn't win a single round, right?
And
so
he did the same thing against Tete then too.
Yeah, exactly. So here's the thing: is he looks the part, but until he fights a guy like Luis Nery, Estrada, who I have concerns about Estrada moving up to 118 a little bit, just because I'm not sure, but I'd like to see him fight Rungvisai, Estrada, or Nery. And then I think some of these questions are going to be answered because Rungvisai can punch your head off. Estrada's a good puncher, not a great puncher, but he's highly skilled, good counterpuncher. And Nery is a big guy who is a southpaw and can definitely punch as well. And in fact, Nery, I know, under unfortunate circumstances, had already beaten the Laniel champion at 118 2 times, though again, not in the best of circumstances. So he's got to fight those guys before I crown him.
All right. We have a question from a listener. We have a question from Daniel in Arizona. Hold on, I got to get my reading glasses on. At least none of my kids are around to make fun of me. But it says here that I cannot believe that anybody would have a problem with the World Boxing Super Series. And a lot of the reasons, in a way, is not fighting anybody that is near him is because Tete had to drop out because of injury.
Well, yeah, I mean, we acknowledge that. I mean, see, that's my thing is you can't control some of the circumstances surrounding it, right?
Yeah.
They got
especially
injured,
in a boxing tournament.
Right, but still, we thank everybody who chimes in, right? We appreciate the comment, but my thing is it's not that Inoue is not fighting these guys because they're injured. I mean, yeah, it's unfortunate that he's not getting either one of those guys.
Yeah, I think this guy is defending the WBSS because that was something beyond their control. And I think what I take away from this is, in a way, Tete should have been a final, and if it was, we wouldn't be complaining.
But remember, that's part of the problem with these kind of tournaments. I mean, you can't, in other words, that would be my answer, is that you can't eliminate that. I mean, you had Holson coming in on short notice fighting Callum Smith in the super middleweight tournament. It's not, you had Brammer was supposed to fight in that and then just disappeared after he got the win in the first round against Rob Brandt. This stuff has, when they did the Super 6 thing on Showtime, there was all kinds of substitutions. So you can't say, oh, well, that's a misfortune. It's happened too much. In other words, so you don't get to have it both ways. That's part of the problem with doing something like this. Now you can say that there's things you like about it, and I'd be the first to say that I like the concept if we were going to do it with only 8 or 9 divisions, and then you eliminate this when you go to 4-man instead of 8. Because then there's less chance of stuff happening. It's much shorter. You're just dealing with a few fights. So I think I'm with everybody else. The concept of a tournament deciding the best, I'm not going to argue against that. Just like everybody who likes that concept is all enthusiastic about it. But the practicality and what you're getting with this WBSS, to me, is not what people perceive it to be.
All right. At Derek7679 says, he said, it seems like, though, when we talk about fights and the World Boxing Super Series is up, those are usually the best fights of that weekend. And that is true, at least in this weekend's case. And we have seen good fights. I see your point to it. I see Derek's point to it. And I think this comes back to this, John. Either way, the World Boxing Super Series does give us better fights than what we're getting without of it in the other divisions.
Yeah, and that's a legitimate point. I do somewhat agree with that. That in boxing, we've got this no-hoper problem has gotten so bad, and we complain about the show every week, and I know his point. I watched both of those fights back-to-back this weekend and enjoyed them. At least those two fights, even though I didn't think Rodriguez had a chance, he's a decent fighter, and I didn't think Branchek was going to win, but he's a good enough of a fighter. He's certainly not a no-hoper. There's no argument for that. So, that was a little bit better than we might get, but I would say, some of those early round matchups are not much different than what we're getting all the time. But yeah, there is some argument that through this WBSS, we're getting some better fights. And, I'll even concede, even though this is not certainly, especially in the U.S., anything anybody's particularly excited about, but you got to be fair. The odds are the fairest indicator of this type of stuff. You look at even that second WBSS cruiserweight tournament they're having, the odds in this upcoming matchups are actually reasonably close. And as you're saying, Mike, and as the question was pointing out, those might not be fights we'd even be getting otherwise.
Yeah, so I kind of agree with Derek there, but I wish it was better.
Yeah, I would just say real quickly that at least we're getting some clarity in some of these divisions. I mean,
Taylor Prograis is a great fight.
Exactly. That's going to be number 1 versus number 2, and you will have a real champion after that tournament is done. And we also had it in the cruiserweight tournament. So there is some clarity that's being given to us by these tournaments. So, yeah, it's unfortunate when people pull out and they can't reschedule and be more fluid with the dates and everything, but at least we're getting some clarity in some of these.
All right, so let's move to...
But let me just add one point on that, though. On both of those tournaments, though, we could have had Usyk and Gassiev fight, and we could have had Taylor and Prograis fight. My point there is just
you couldn't, because they wouldn't have let it happen.
That's the best argument for it, right? But I'm just saying we're still getting a delay we don't need. But I agree with you, Mike. Let's say and that is a good argument. Let's say for the sake of argument,
we may never saw that fight, John.
Yeah. If we wouldn't have seen it, then I'm in favor of it. But we don't know that. But, yeah, I'd say...
We can be pretty sure, though, from the shit we see every weekend, John.
Yeah. Well, I mean, it's possible those fights wouldn't have happened, but you could have had those without having all the other stuff.
Yeah, we could have, but...
Well, but one thing, though, is did we really need to skip from Usyk to Gassiev? Because from what I saw, Briedis fought Usyk closer than Gassiev did.
Yeah.
He did in that fight, but you would have picked Gassiev and Usyk to fight each other, in the final, just like you would have picked Taylor and Prograis.
Yeah, but you also had Dorticos in there, so you probably had the 4 best cruiserweights in the world in the semifinals of that tournament.
Well, I mean, and the best fight of all the WBSS so far has been Dorticos and Gassiev.
I wasn't impressed by any of those fights, but they were all right. But then again, I live in 1978. All right, guys, let's go ahead and let's talk about Deontay Wilder, Dominic Breazeale, which I think ended pretty much the way we thought it would, maybe a round or two sooner. But were you impressed, Jeremiah? The only thing I was impressed was he did do what he should have done, and as John always says, that's a big thing because we see guys like Billy Joe Saunders did carry a guy named Shefat, and his name fits. an entire 12 rounds. So I will give him this. He did what he needed to do, but I really didn't need to see it.
Yeah, and Jim Gray comes across as the jerk for asking.
Jim Gray's always an asshole, by the way, though. So go ahead.
I know, but you know what? As much as I don't like it sometimes, and it rubs me wrong, I do like it in instances like this where he's like, "Hey man, why are you fighting Brazil?"
Yeah, I agree. I just wanted to get in that I think Jim Gray's an asshole because I do. But go ahead.
Yeah, I don't know what he's like in real life, but yeah, he certainly has that demeanor about him. But, I mean, it ended quicker than I thought it would. I mean, I thought Brazil would be a bit more cautious in his approach, not throwing lead left hooks, at a right
or lead
puncher.
Uppercuts.
Yeah, I mean, I was it didn't really look, I don't know. I was under the impression that it would go a few rounds. Brazil would, be a little bit more cautious or, at least try to get hit less than he did. But yeah, I mean, Wilder got the job done, and the right hand, it was a sizzling punch. I mean, he cocked it, he threw it, and he blasted the guy and got him out of there. I mean, and it was almost like a highlight reel type stoppage. So, the performance was good. I mean, we did say beforehand on the last weekly show that there is a sort of gauge factor to this because Anthony Joshua took 6-7 rounds to get rid of him. So, Wilder did what he said he was going to do, and he got rid of him quickly. And to be honest with you, I mean, ESPN picked it up, CNN picked it up. It was a good punch.
All right, John?
Well, actually, I pretty much agree with you guys. I mean, it's Wilder just did, yeah,
we all agreed last week that Brazil did not belong in this fight anyways.
Yeah, we didn't need this fight, but, we were getting it. And since the fight was going to happen, I agree with you guys. Wilder, I mean, that's just what you got to give Wilder here. And that's all these guys can in these situations. And the Sanders example was good because that just happened the same weekend, and that's a guy not doing what he should. Wilder did everything he could possibly do with this situation. He got a highlight reel knockout. And, it went viral. A lot of people saw it. I mean, that's really all he could do. Not to sound crazy, but if you want to see, even though we all picked Wilder and thought we didn't need this fight, if you wanted to see why you thought Brazil might have a chance, it was that little part where Wilder had first hurt him and then Brazil threw a couple of big hands at Wilder. But, and Brazil fights pretty well when he's hurt, but except for Joshua. But,
how about this, though, John? I think Brazil's downfall was landing those two punches. And then once Joshua or Wilder backed up a little bit off of it, I think that he thought maybe he hurt Wilder worse than what he did. And that led him to leave himself open to get cracked.
Yeah, I think that was part of it. And then, I've seen, this isn't even secondhand, I've mentioned it before on the show, but it's interesting to me. I've seen video interviews with Gassiev and Klitschko, Vladimir Klitschko, when they're talking about Wilder. And, I'm actually hearing them say, not being quoted, they like Wilder. They think he's really dangerous because the way he just gets after guys. They say that he gets after people like you just don't see fighters all the time. And I think that was the one good decision Wilder made here is there's maybe a slight more risk in the short term, but he wasn't going to let Brazil hang around for some rounds.
I think he gets after guys that aren't a threat to him. I didn't see him really charging and throwing a lot of punches at Fury, and I didn't see him do it against Ortiz until he got hurt.
He did it, at moments against Fury. I think in Ortiz he wasn't doing it, but I think in Ortiz, as I said when we were going over that fight at the time before and after, I think that was the southpaw style of Ortiz. Was a little bit more difficult for him to attack. But most fights when he's in the shape he should be, which he is most of the time, he'll go after guys to get him out of there. And he did that with Brazil, and it could have been, like you said, Mike, it could have even been a couple of shots that, Brazil did land, and Wilder was just saying, hey, I'm going to take care of business. But I think it was a good decision. And as we said in the show going in, even anything you did like about Brazil, nobody can argue that he's got any kind of defensive skill. He doesn't.
I don't think anybody can really argue that he has much boxing skill.
No, he's not really right. He's not a skilled guy. He had some other attributes, but he's not particularly skilled, and he doesn't particularly have defense.
And he can't take a punch that good either.
Well, Jeremiah had said that, but now you have to wonder. I mean, he'd gotten up, and it's heavyweights, and he doesn't have defense. But, yeah, Wilder's a huge puncher, and that shot could have taken out anybody. But on the other hand, Brazil has been hitting the canvas quite a bit. I think it's a lot. He's got no defense, and you can't let the heavyweights just tee off on you like that. But it'd be hard to argue that he's got an iron chin at this point as well. So it's probably all these factors coming together and, led up to a highlight reel. For Wilder, it went as good as it possibly could have.
All right. So when we look at this, we got a bunch of questions that we had in direct message today on Twitter. George Foreman, this is from Donnie. I can't read the rest of that because I think it's a bad word. But from Donnie from Kansas City, who says George Foreman says that Wilder and Joshua would be the biggest fight in heavyweight championship history. Do any of you guys agree with that? No.
No, I don't think yet. I think George is not quite. I mean,
George is good at the hyperbole, if you remember him on HBO.
Yeah, he is. He always says some unique stuff. But I mean, in inflation-adjusted dollars, I'm thinking of a fight like Ali Frazier won. I mean, it's not gonna. And then you could go all the way back to Johnson Jeffries and things like that. I mean, Lewis Schmeling, and,
Holmes Cooney, Tyson Lewis.
Yeah, Holmes Cooney and
Holyfield Lewis.
But I mean, it's going to. But you know what? It's going to generate a lot in inflation-adjusted dollars. It would. I mean, but no, boxing's a little too far down. I hate to say it, but I think even when you're talking about a mega event like that, I don't think it's going to be the biggest.
I don't think it gets near 1 million pay-per-view buys in the United States at $90 or $100.
That's getting tough, but I think that's getting more. I think that's become feasible when you look at numbers. But they probably. I hate saying this because we want these fights. I really hate saying this, but they might have a little bit farther to go to start locking in the kind of numbers they want like that. I hate saying that because
what we got TV ratings
gives them a
wise,
justification for what they're
TV
doing.
ratings wise, that 990,000 viewers. That's not very good. And that's on a Saturday night on cable, and it was the 10th highest rated cable show viewer-wise.
Yeah, but I think that's – I disagree there, Mike. I think that's good for premium cable,
really? Especially
for fighting Brazil. Yeah, and in the climate we're at. I mean, I thought this would be real good, and I did tweet this out. I don't think I mentioned it on the show, but it's still on the Twitter. I said 1 million. Are you 10,000 short? So – for me, he did it in the ring and then on the numbers because it's premium cable. That's the thing. It gets into TV nuances. But
there's right now 25.5 million Showtime subscribers, at least on the streaming service or on the standalone.
Right.
That's less than 1 million. That's not very good.
It's still good for in today's boxing compared to what you're getting when it's premium cable because they're going to do a calculation off that. And you're right, they're going to want to get more than 1 million pay-per-view buys, but they can do a calculation off that when they're saying he's doing 990,000 on premium cable, which you have to pay for. There's no ads, okay?
But you didn't have to pay for it this week. If you wanted to see the fight, you could sign up and watch it for free.
Right. It was free trial weekend, but as we know, we've been watching boxing for decades, even on Showtime, and they always have these free trials when they have a fight.
So my point is, it's 990,000, but how many of those watched it because it was a free Showtime weekend that weren't even subscribers?
I mean, I'm sure they picked some up, but that has a value to Showtime of possibly picking up those subscribers. So it's got a value there, but they're going to do they're going to look at that and say if you take that, I mean they know that doesn't mean you get 1 million pay-per-view buys automatically, but they do look at it like with a better opponent, what percentage of those fans, which let's face it, most of the pay-per-view buyers come out of the people that have boxing for Showtime in the U.S. So that's, they're looking at this stuff. And that's when they really went to pay-per-view for Wilder Fury, is they saw that Wilder did about $1 million for Brazil on Showtime and 1.2 for Ortiz, and they did it in their head, and they said, we think we can get this. Now, Arum miscalculated with Crawford. He saw Crawford get that $2 million for Benavidez after the Heisman ceremony. I think that was the one after the Heisman ceremony, right? And he thought he could stick Khan out there and get a high percentage off of that, and that's a different thing, because those weren't people watching pay cable either who already had that. They're all just looking for hardcore fans now, and but with their calculations, I think they're probably getting darn close to what they want to get right now with the way Wilder is kind of ascending. Now, Joshua's going to fight on DAZN on June 1st, and again, if you love DAZN or whatever, it's not knocking out just facts. Is if Canelo was only seen by somewhere between 300 and 600,000 DAZN subscribers, how many is Joshua going to be seen for Ruiz?
Yeah, but if we look at Joshua, this is a man, when he fought Klitschko, did it in front of 90,000 people, got 1.5 million pay-per-view buys in Great Britain, had 10 million people watching in Germany, and the Showtime numbers for the live event during the day was almost 700,000, and the replay that night was 738,000. He did 1.4 million on Showtime.
Joshua got good numbers on Showtime for the Klitschko fight, no doubt about that. But remember, the pay-per-view numbers in the UK are deceptive, because and the promoters take this into account too. This is really important when you're evaluating these things. They pay 1/3 the price of Americans in the equivalent dollars. So.
But
Wilder,
how about this?
Fury,
Do you think that any fight that Wilder has been in would have had 1.5 million people pay $20 for it?
Well, that's why the Fury number was so big for him, because it's 3 times more than they get in the UK, and Joshua did about 1 million for Parker, and with the fans paying 1/3 as much as they pay for Wilder Fury, and Wilder got about 330,000 for Fury, so the actual dollars that were generated were about the same. So that's the thing. Now, live gate, you get a big live gate with people in the UK, but in the US you have Vegas site fees, and that's why even Hearns said that the fights in the US ultimately bring in more money. So I think they're probably getting close to what they want to get to. But, as you've said, and we've all said, there can be upsets in the heavyweight division. Even now, you don't think you're seeing it, but it can happen. So they're taking risks there. And then Joshua did do well on Showtime with the Klitschko fight, but then his numbers were going down after that.
Well, no, because against Parker,
on DAZN, but
against Parker, he did the same numbers that Wilder does. When you put the live afternoon broadcast, which was 450,000, the replay that night was 550,000. You had right around 1 million.
Yeah, but that's not all different people. He did good numbers.
Wait a second. I don't think anybody watched Joshua Parker twice, especially on the same day, John.
But I'd have to go back and look at it. But his numbers on show were dropping after the Klitschko fight. Now, Show was committed to him. They were going to build him up. There's no doubt about it. And I think he would have.
Yeah, but remember, he is fighting live in the afternoon. And afternoon on Showtime is not going to do as good as evening. But when you combine those two numbers, his numbers were there. And when we look at the TV ratings, his last title defense, Deontay Wilder's against Gerald Washington, which was on Fox TV, which was over-the-air free TV, only did 1.8 million at a peak.
Well, no, I agree. When you look at, that's where I've been arguing that Wilder's ascending. I mean, I agree. You look at like his numbers on NBC for Duhaupas, I think he might have done a little over 1 million or something like that. I mean,
it was like 700,000. He did have a high fight of like 2.1 million. I forget. It was the third one. I don't remember which one that was, though.
But he's going up. But let me just say it this way. I think that, and I'm not picking sides, but this is just a fact, which these are all these problems we have in boxing, because I think boxing needs exposure. And I'm not even crazy about premium. And then DAZN is one level of exposure below premium cable, as far as I'm concerned. Is Show was behind Joshua. They were going to build him up. They were saying they wanted to build him up like a modern day, Tyson type of exposure, and Hearn decided to take him over to this DAZN deal. what I'm just saying is I do think Joshua's U.S. profile would have steadily gone up had he been with Showtime and appeared in the U.S. even sooner. And now, he's going to fight in the Garden, which I think that's always good because even in today's age, you get some New York media and things, but it's just not going to be seen by enough people on DAZN in the U.S.
But he will draw a bigger crowd to Madison Square Garden, probably.
Live gate, yeah. He might. I'm not going to say that he won't. They'll have people coming over from the UK, but that's not.
I think part of it, though,
anymore.
Is when you talk about the biggest fight of all time, if you drop Joshua and Wilder in the middle of Kinshasa's Zaire to fight, I don't think that many people care. I think overall this is something where people in the UK care about Joshua. Very few people in the U.S. care about Wilder, and very few people outside of Great Britain really care about Joshua. I think this is a limited regional sport anymore. When I look at the cable ratings for Saturday night, and this is not to say anything for Joshua because this would go for him too in the numbers I just recited. Beachfront Bargain Hunt did 1.2 million at the same time. Diners, drive-ins, and dives, whatever that is, I know what it is. I watch the show all the time. But it drew 1.1 million. And Jeremiah, when I look at these numbers, I don't see this is a big fight for fight fans, but I don't really see where there's any buzz worldwide for these guys to fight each other.
Well, no, that's why I think it's absurd to claim that this is, I think, anywhere near the biggest heavyweight fight ever. When we talk about the word big anyways, it seems as if, when we're talking about a modern context, everybody's always talking financially, and unfortunately that's not all the word big entails. And again, there's multiple ways to read into that. We were talking not long ago about how, Jack Dempsey, when he fought Georges Carpentier, he had royalty. He had like Rockefeller sitting ringside and their sons and daughters. This was not right in terms of that kind of clout, right? Muhammad Ali's meeting, political figures and fighting in the Philippines. It's not the same. These figures, they have nowhere near the same drawing power, in my opinion, that some of these other figures did. Joshua was awfully popular in Britain, like you said. Wilder, he's got some following here, but it's nowhere near the worldwide appeal that, some of these other guys. And again, it's like I find myself often going back to just an old Ali fighting Spinks, right? And over 2 billion, an estimated 2 billion people saw that. And they actually offered, I was reading an article today, they offered Muhammad Ali a fight with Mike Rossman, who was at the former light heavyweights, former Jewish light heavyweight. They offered him $24 million to take that fight. In today's dollars, that's something like $83 million.
They offered Ali $24 million to fight Rossman?
Yes.
After the second Spinks fight?
So the article was dated February 1st, 1979.
Yeah, that would have been after the second fight then.
Okay, so yes. So they offered him $24 million to fight Mike Rossman, and he was talking about, because the whole topic was him retiring. And so, again, when you adjust inflation, we're talking about a guy who's going to collect over $83 million. I think, in fact, it was almost $84 million. I believe it was like $83,770,000, something like that. So he was potentially going to get paid $84 million in today's money, and that was, I think, that was just the purse. I don't think that was included everything else, So again, let's put this into perspective. We're talking about World Cup numbers. So World Cups draw, the biggest overall viewership than anything, and Ali Spinks 2 did almost 2 World Cups worth of viewership. And when you talk about, actually, somebody, Brian Duncan, if you're listening, I appreciate you. I think you run that Winneil Boxing page, and you do a great job. He also mentioned that back in the day, and you even touched on this too, Mike, how they would put, these fights on in movie theaters as well, for all these fights, and you could pack the place.
Yeah.
It's just, in terms of the buzz, in terms of the viewership, I don't think this is anywhere near the biggest heavyweight fight of all time.
No, I mean, in my lifetime, I've seen 10 to 15 at least bigger. And to me, the thing that strikes me as most interesting about this fight is we really don't know if either one of these guys are any good, but they both can punch, so it should be entertaining, John.
Yeah, I think they're both good, but actually we agree. I've been tweeting out a lot about this lately, and I've been seeing really in 2019. And, Jeremiah has, and you get it too, Mike, with what you're just talking about it, but Jeremiah and I have talked about this a lot. And,
You're breaking up real bad, John.
okay. A lot of people don't get it with the DAZN thing and stuff because they don't realize the problems with it when less and less of people are seeing stuff. But what I'm getting to at the point is, in the U.S., even in 2019, you see the numbers, and people of us kind of tended to assume, oh, well, we don't have casual fans anymore. What I'm seeing in box is that, to me, is actually hardcore fans dropping off. We don't think of that often, but that's hardcore fans dropping off because that rough hardcore number, which is million, you're not seeing that number on every boxing broadcast anymore. And it used to then go a little higher than that. You see those numbers dropping, and then sometimes they're even going real low. And I think that's a big problem. To me, a segment of the hardcore fan base has dropped off.
Well, and I think this, and they've always said this, Jeremiah, but basically as this heavyweight division goes the rest of boxing with it. And the heavyweight division has not been good since the 90s. And this has been basically a joke. Klitschko was really good. He had a couple guys that could contend with him. Now we've got a bunch of guys who won't even fight each other. And I think when your marquee guys are gone, let's face it, back in the day, up until the early 2000s, the heavyweight champion of the world was the most revered man in sports, but we don't even have a heavyweight champion anymore.
Yeah, I mean, and this is the thing is again, we're not promoters, but it just seems also obvious to us how you get the sport up and running again, and it's by having the best fight the best, and to bring clarity to the sport. I mean, the fact that you don't have this is what the UFC has on boxing, and one thing I appreciate about what they do is you have less divisions, and you've got single champions within those divisions. Of course, some of their stuff has been a little muddied with the interim belts and whatnot. But, I mean, the fact that you could have potentially 4 or 5 guys claiming to be a quote-unquote world champion at one time just shows you, the state that we're in. And it allows these guys to avoid one another because they can claim to be world champions, right? So, while they're right now, I mean, look at the graphic that PBC posted or Showtime
that was an absolute
during
joke.
the fight. Yeah, so I mean, Showtime's quote unquote historians, I'm not quite sure they're doing a particularly good job because I remember that Mauro Ranallo said, oh God, what was it? On one of the shows, he said that the last unified heavyweight champion was, I think, Mike Tyson, and he completely ignored the fact that the WBO title was not seen as something significant during even Lennox Lewis's time. I mean, you see all sorts of revisionist history going on.
Well, the Ring magazine, I don't even think recognized the WBO until the mid to late 2000s. I mean, somewhere between 2003 and 2010.
They used to not even worry about the alphabet.
Yeah.
You're breaking up, John, a little bit. But, yeah, so there was actually a time when I think it was I'm trying to think of who it was. Maybe it was Nigel Collins and, who else? He's on the rankings board as well. His name, not Eric Rankin, but something like that. There was a time when they tried to ignore all that nonsense. Raskin, correct.
Okay.
Yeah, so there was a time when they were all on the ring when they tried to ignore all this alphabet nonsense. But really, in America, the WBO title did not really become a thing until Bob Arum started rubbing elbows with him. So you had Miguel Cotto pick up the belt and some of these other ones, right? And then, Manny Pacquiao was picking it up and some others. It just really wasn't a thing. I mean, even look at Vladimir Klitschko. When he had the WBO belt, and Lennox Lewis had the other 3, and he was fighting Vitaly Klitschko. Nobody cared about Klitschko's belt. Listen, I was a Vladimir Klitschko defender, well, at least more so than a lot of guys back in the day, because, they're like, oh, well, he's boring. I'm like, well, at least he's scoring knockouts. But I'm seeing more and more revisionist history surrounding this sort of stuff where you actually see, go to Wikipedia. You will see that Vladimir Klitschko is all of a sudden up there with guys like Joe Louis in terms of total title fights and total title defenses. It's nonsense, man. I mean, he didn't become the champion until he beat Ruslan Shagayev. And another thing, too, is back to my original point was you had Showtime. And, again, so I wanted to complete that point first, where Mauro Ranallo said that the last unified heavyweight champion was Mike Tyson, completely ignoring, because obviously the guy is not a historian himself, completely ignoring the fact that Lennox Lewis held what were considered all of the major titles as well. And Lennox Lewis himself was like, Mauro Ranallo, come on, Showtime. Nobody really gave a shit about the WBO belt back then.
Yeah.
And
plus Lewis beat the man in Holyfield. That's how he became the champion.
Well, exactly. But the Showtime had the audacity to say that they backed their historians and they were going to go with that story over the man who was fighting and over the man who was the heavyweight champion at the time. I mean, give me a goddamn break, right? Well, anyways, back to what we're talking about, the graphic. So they put, Deontay Wilder, his name up, and they talk about his trinket defenses, and he's got 9, right? And so this is what's happening with boxing, and this is why I caution everybody, you really got to do your homework, because it's all getting convoluted, and a lot of it's not making sense. And unfortunately, you got to sound like you're talking string theory to a casual fan to explain this sport to anybody anymore. Okay, so Deontay Wilder is not the heavyweight champion, yet they're putting his alphabet soup defenses against guys like Jack Dempsey, against guys like Muhammad Ali, and against guys like Joe Louis. All of those guys were the champions when they fought through the entire time. There was not a single alphabet soup defense that Muhammad Ali had. All of his were linear/linear. All of Joe Louis's, same thing. All of Jack Dempsey's, all of Rocky Marciano's, and a number of these other guys. But they're comparing his total with these other guys. I mean, it's getting convoluted, and this is why you see guys like, oh, well, Chris John belongs in the Hall of Fame because he had, 19 alphabet soup defenses, even though when you read the context into it, he only fought like 2-3 top 10 guys, and he competed against one elite level fighter. So again, it's just misleading, and I don't like it. I don't see the alphabet totals as really anything significant between Wilder or Joshua or any of that stuff. I just don't like what they're doing there.
All right, John?
Yeah, I mean, I agree. I don't like the alphabet stuff. I mean, where I think, I just disagree. I think, Fury, Jeremiah thought Fury was better than I did. I think Fury's good now. I mean, he's convinced me. I think Joshua's good. I think Wilder's good. I think some of the other guys. I think the division has the potential.
This division is shit, John. There's nobody. We had Dominic Brazil, you just said was a top 10 heavyweight.
I think it's got potential to be like the 90s, but it's like Jeremiah said with the alphabet stuff, and I agree that we're falling into the quicksand. We don't have a defined heavyweight champion. As much as I like Deontay Wilder, he's never been a heavyweight champion to me. I don't think, do you really think Anthony Joshua became the heavyweight champion of the world because he beat Charles Martin? I mean, this is what absurd point we're at. Fury had the claim right there, and he took PEDs and sat it out for 2.5 years.
Well, PEDs shouldn't have cost him the title because, Canelo still got – well, I mean, come on, John. Canelo still got to fight for the title.
Yeah, but Canelo's in a different – it was a different situation. Look, there's been multiple heavyweights that have tested.
How's it a different situation if you test positive for PEDs?
Because it was a strict liability situation where Canelo's sample was within the limits for contaminated meat.
Bullshit.
So
that's horseshit. All these guys do this. I mean, the thing is, a bitch, is the reason we have problems with steroids is because we play favorites with the favorite sons. I mean, they did a hair follicle test, but they waited till 45 days later to do it because 45 days later, you can't really test it. because it's already gone. And the thing is this, he tested positive. The problem I have here is he tests positive, but it's all right. Tyson Fury did, and it's not all right. That's just wrong.
But it's just not the same. It's just not the same situation, though.
Okay. How's it not the same situation? They both tested positive.
Because one guy tested positive under a strict liability standard for something that was within the levels of if he would have eaten contaminated meat, and the other guy was not in that situation.
All right. I think it's an absolute joke to think that Canelo Alvarez wasn't doing this most of his career. I think it's an absolute joke to think that most of these guys aren't doing this for their entire career. I'm not picking on Canelo Alvarez. All I know is in sports, especially combat sports, 90% of these guys are doing something. It may not be steroids, but they're doing something illegal. So either, once again, let everybody do the illegal stuff or actually penalize them. And if you think that somebody's done something wrong, Canelo Alvarez knows what he's ingesting. He has a freaking dietitian. He has a cook. They know what the hell they're doing. To think that he didn't know this and that he was clean is a joke. It's a joke to think Alexander Povetkin was clean. It's a joke to think Tyson Fury was clean. But when we want to delineate and separate these three and say, well, Canelo's all right because he was within the levels of contaminated meat, I think that's bullshit, Jeremiah.
Well, he did get suspended, though. See, that's the thing. He still got suspended.
Yeah, he got suspended, and 6 months later, he got the same fight.
Well, but here's the thing, though. I mean, I do think most of these guys are doing it, and it's just odd how, a lot of these guys. I mean, like Vladimir Klitschko, again, I like the guy, but what testing did he take throughout his career?
Oh, yeah, he's on steroids. Hell, I think they all are, John. I'm not shitting on Canelo. I'm shitting on all of them. So we either got to stop them all from doing it by setting an example, or we got to let them all do it.
But, Wilder's been under the WBC clean drug program doing the VADA testing for a lot of fights now. I mean, you got to at least give him that.
No. Because have you ever seen Icarus on Netflix?
I haven't seen it, no.
Go watch Icarus. It'll show you how these guys, Deontay Wilder's done PEDs. I think it's nuts to think he hasn't. I think it's nuts to think any of these guys that are ripped to hell haven't. I mean, there's ways around everything. And it's not like USADA and VADA or, there's certain things that in a contract you can test for and certain things you can't a lot of times. And I think this, with the medication under a physician's care, unless these guys are stupid. And this is why I think Canelo was within contaminated limits, is because he just got tested a few days before he thought he would. And this is what happened. But when I look at this, Jeremiah, correct me if I'm wrong, but in a lot of these contracts, there's only certain stuff they can test for.
Well, and that's one cautionary tale of all of this too, and including VADA, who I think does a good job. Margaret Goodman, who helps do this along, and who was a ringside doctor for many, many years. I mean, she constantly gets compliments on her ethics, but even VADA tells you to not pay attention to just the testing in general, to say, hey, well, this fight's getting VADA testing, so these guys are good and clean. VADA itself has sent out multiple messages saying, hey, don't just get hung up on that. Pay attention to what kinds of tests are being administered and at what times. So if you say, hey, I want this specific kind of testing, but I only want it 4 weeks before the fight, there are plenty of workarounds into this stuff too, and it's not as if VADA is. I don't think VADA is being unethical by saying, okay, well, we're going to do the test. I mean, they're still running the test, they're still drawing blood and whatnot. But you just need to pump the brakes on saying, well, so and so tests with VADA and they're good, they're clean. Again, a lot of these guys who are testing with VADA, they're not doing it year round. So I mean, there are plenty of you can cycle off months beforehand and, do VADA testing and, be free and clear to fight. But again, there is a difference still. There is a difference with some of these situations still. I mean, with Tyson Fury, I mean, we have to acknowledge it. He did not test positive for PEDs after the Klitschko fight, right? So there is some difference there, right? It's not as if he was going into a real championship fight and tested on PEDs. I think this is during the Christian Hammer fight or something, that he tested positive for PEDs, or maybe it was one of the other ones. I can't really remember, but it was before the Klitschko fight. So he was not taking PEDs during the Klitschko fight.
Yeah, but real quick with that and with everything, and I've looked into this a lot because we talked about it on other shows that weren't boxing. The one thing that stood out to me is 5, 6, 7 years later, with a lot of these PEDs, John, even if they would test clean then, 30 to 40% of what they took is still in their system. And a lot of the things I've seen is 20 to 30% in their system for the rest of their life. So they're still getting a benefit from this. So it either needs to be stopped and policed, or it needs to be let go. And I know we've had this argument before, and I said they just ought to let everybody go. But the more I look at this, I think maybe if you're ranked in the top 10, you should just be tested every 2 weeks.
Oh, no, I'd like to see it stop. I've debated that too. Do you just let it go? But I like to see it stopped. I think it's too dangerous, and we don't want to turn it into a doctor-drug competition. But, the VADA testing, let's face it, the VADA testing's caught many, many more guys. So we have to say that the VADA testing has made a difference. It's better. It's caught a lot more people. So
yeah, but if it caught 10% compared to USADA's 2% or 1%, is that really a big enough deal here when we got guys fighting guys where their lives are on the line?
No, I agree that it's not the VADA. I can clarify, and that's where I agree with both of you on that. I think I just want to add that has been a lot better. It's caught a lot more guys. I don't think that's really in dispute. And I think some of these, look, Jarrell Miller was dodging VADA testing before he finally, went into the Joshua.
Hey, at least we know why now that fat ass could go 12 rounds.
we do now because we couldn't explain it. Now it does. Let's face it.
I can't believe we didn't realize it when we talked about it.
well, again, he was.
But you don't think it peds when you see Jarrell Miller,
right? He was skirting VADA, but there is a difference. But I do have to add, yes, there is a difference with the all year round, and like Jeremiah said and Mike, you're saying, about guys cycling off it and then taking it when it's far away from the fight. And, you had Donaire and Edwin Rodriguez were doing the all year round. I don't think they're still doing it. I could be wrong, but now Canelo is the only guy doing the all year round now. But the thing is, Canelo, I think he has to pay, maybe Jeremiah, the numbers. And the boxers, that's the problem. We want a safe sport. You could get killed in there. But Canelo's got the money. He's like one of the only guys that really's got the money. He puts his life on the line, not that he should have to waste it. But I think, what is it? Like when he's got to pay, and it's like $30,000 periodically. Like, you got it. Like this is Canelo's got to pay for this to do all year round out of his own money. One of these other guys is going to be able to be pulling out $30,000.
I can answer that question. How much do they pay in sanctioning fees?
Correct.
Yeah, I'd like to see that instead of the sanctioning
fees. Take it out of the sanctioning
fees.
And how about this then? Sanctioning fees pays for your drug test. Once you've failed it, you're suspended for 2 years, and then if you want to come back to boxing, you got to pay to be tested every month out of your own pocket.
Yeah, something like that would be good.
But 6 months for Canelo was wrong. It just was. And, the backdated penalty Tyson Fury got was wrong. And, I'm not playing favorites here because actually I like Tyson Fury. I respect Canelo now. I think he's a hell of a fighter. I think he should be top 3 pound for pound. He's an elite fighter. But we've got to hold everybody accountable for what they're doing, or we got to hold nobody accountable.
Well, yeah, and that's what we're doing. Boxing is doing much the same as other sports. That's what I say about these people who are, go on and on and on about sports evolution. They were like, well, this 250-pound linebacker can run the same 40 as a wide receiver in, the 60s. And I'm like, well, yeah, it's not all diet, man. That's PEDs too.
Oh yeah, that's every sport. Watch Icarus on Netflix. I know Jeremiah's seen it, but when you watch that, John, and the way Lance Armstrong and 90% of the cyclists tested clean constantly because they had the right physician, you will not be so quick to say Deontay Wilder's not doing anything. And I think this is not a shot at Deontay Wilder. I think Anthony Joshua's doing stuff. And you know what? Tyson Fury lost 100 pounds in a year. And he didn't, look all shitty after doing it like most people do. So I'll just leave that there. I'll leave the fact that Anthony Joshua has muscles growing on top of muscles. And, Deontay Wilder has very little body fat, and he's in his early 30s. So I'll just leave it there. I think all three of those guys are probably doing something. I'm not going to sit here and say they are, but I'm saying there's a better chance than not that they are.
Well, and think about this. I want to put this into perspective real quick, too, because I'm obviously of the opinion, as you as well, in the fact that I think the majority of these top-level fighters are doing it. I mean, again, I'm gonna go back and put something into perspective, and then I'm gonna bring it back in. But you look at Roy Jones; he got caught, and we're talking about the '90s when the drug testing was shit. Okay, Shane Mosley, he never tested positive, but he admitted in the Balco scandal that he was using the cream and other stuff. So we're talking about how two guys who reached the pound-for-pound top, the number one, because Mosley was actually put atop number one after he beat De La Hoya in the first fight. So we're talking about two guys who were pound-for-pound number one in the 90s doing this stuff, and the drug testing was garbage. Okay, we're talking about, like local commission stuff. And this is where I want to bring it back in. Okay, so we're talking about two guys in the 90s who were getting caught, pound-for-pound best guys. You're telling me that a lot of other people weren't doing that? I mean, Roy Jones, yeah, he was a phenom, right? The PDs only do so much for you, but look how shredded he was. A lot of this stuff just looks unnatural. Shane Mosley, it's almost like you could tell.
Hey, how about this
so
one?
Shredded.
You go back to the 80s and look at a 14 or 15-year-old Mike Tyson and the way he was built, and you tell me Cus D'Amato wasn't feeding him something outside of food.
Well, yeah, and then we talk about Evander Holyfield as well. And
yeah, no doubt Holyfield did.
Well, yeah, because if I'm not mistaken, Evander Holyfield was working with, who was it, Rock Newman or something, who was like a two-time Mr. Universe.
No, not Rock Newman. Rock Newman was the dude where you're thinking, is it Lee Haney?
Yeah, Lee Haney.
Yeah, Lee Haney was the bodybuilder. Rock Newman was the fat little bald dude that was, I don't know if he was black or white.
Bowe's
but
manager.
yeah, he's the one.
He was Riddick Bowe's
He's the one that helped destroy Riddick Bowe's career. Outside of Riddick Bowe, who had a big hand in that himself.
Okay, but yeah. So okay, I got to get a little confused there, but yes. Okay, and so where I want to bring this in is that we're talking about pound-for-pound level guys doing this stuff. Now, bring us back to a conversation which we had with James Martirosian, Mike.
Yeah.
So I asked him about Memo Heredia, who is a well-known PED guy, done all sorts of big interviews for people, was involved in the Balco scandal. He offered to put James Martirosian on a PED plan for $10,000 to $15,000, I think, for the year. Okay, so let's contrast that with the price of testing. So Heredia, who's in a documentary for PED use, I mean, go look it up. He's in Mexico. He goes to a counter in a pharmacy and gets all the PEDs that he wants, and then he mixes this shit in a lab. And he says that if something gets popped, because he has fucked up in boxing already. You look at Mickey Bay, and Mickey Bay was working with Heredia, and Mickey Bay's testosterone level was through the roof. It was 33/1, and the average person is a 1-to-1. Okay, so drug testing is $30,000 per BADA, but you can get on a PED plan with a well-known, world-renowned chemist in Memo Heredia for $10,000 to $15,000, and he's been beating the system for many, many years. That's what I want to, where I want to steer this. I mean, look at that, right? You can have a chemist make sure you pass all the drug tests in the world, and then you got to pay $30,000 to get caught. What makes sense?
Yeah, which is why it's happening. And that's why I don't even think we should bring up guys getting busted for it anymore, John, because I think we ought to just go under the assumption they're all doing it, and some of them are just stupid and screw up and get caught.
Well, I still think with Nevada, I think that they've busted enough people that I think that these guys that are passing VADA tests, you know, I think you got to give them.
How many people have they busted? Jeremiah, do you know how many people they busted?
Yes, so I know that they have a 3% catch rate, which is much, much, much better than the one person USADA has ever caught.
Yeah, but it's still 3%.
But it's better than nothing. I mean, that's a net.
So, I still think those are just the idiots to get caught.
I think the VADA testing. I mean, I think the VADA testing is a better standard and it's stricter. But you know, it's not all year round. There's no dispute on that. It's not all year round.
It doesn't matter because no matter how they do it, these guys can get around it. At 3%. Do you think that only 3% of guys that are testing with VADA use any kind of PEDs?
Well, I mean, I don't know, but I know that when they're going into VADA testing, that there's guys that are getting caught by VADA. I mean, it may be, which you really, let's face it, you know, first you want it out of in competition. In other words, you don't want it. I mean, you don't want anybody doing it, but you certainly don't want anybody doing it going.
But if they did it 3 months before the competition, it's still in their bloodstream during the competition, and they had an advantage when they were working. So if you come out and you got a fight and you're going to go to a training camp for 8 weeks, and you're going to be tested at some point there, you know, you do 4 weeks of conditioning beforehand where you use it, then you cycle off of it for a few weeks before they get you.
Oh, and that may be happening, but it's still, let's face it, we don't want it at all, but we certainly don't want it in competition. I mean, you definitely want to get it.
But it's still in competition because it's in your bloodstream, John. I mean,
well, directly
so
into
even if you're not
you don't want guys going into the fight on PEDs.
Yeah, but you're not going to use PEDs normally going into a fight. You use the PEDs in training, and you're going to cycle off before the fight. NFL. If I'm an NFL football player, I do my cycle in March, April, May, and by the time I get to July, I've got all the benefits of that, but I'll test negative.
But if you don't have any testing, you're going to have people using substances to try to help themselves going right up to fight time and actually in the fight itself.
There's very few substances that you're going to take during a season or at that sporting event that are really going to help you that much. What I'm telling you is the PEDs, you cycle on and you cycle off because it builds up in your system. You won't test positive for it, but I can tell you this, and I've coached football at a fairly high level, and a lot of those guys were on stuff, but very few of them were trying to do the stuff during the season because the most effective way to do it is ahead of time.
But also you got stimulants. You could get people taking stimulants during competition, which does give you an advantage if you're going to take an illegal amount of stimulants. I mean, it's going to benefit your performance during the event.
Okay.
Yeah, I mean that's right. I mean you could use stimulants and it could give you some. I mean that's why Aaron Pryor was probably
the one I mixed
doing
the one I mixed, which is worse looking back than I even thought at the time. It really is. Because Pryor.
Don't mix water.
That was not good.
No, you don't mix water with water. That doesn't make any sense. And not only that, he'd been involved in shady stuff before that. But yeah, I mean, it's better than what we have. The problem is, in a sport like boxing, there's no single governing body. So, good luck making this universal. I mean, if you had the power to do it, and the guys in the top 10, 15, 20 could do year-round drug testing, you could help clean things up. But, I mean, no matter what sport it is, none of these guys, even the Olympics, a lot of people get this idea that they're all, fair and ethical and worried about the fairest competition. I mean, it's just not the case. I mean, Olympic-style drug testing, that was the thing about Floyd Mayweather. It's like, well, I want to do Olympic-style testing. Well, Olympic-style testing is not that good. I mean, Victor Conti has said this time and time again. It's not very good. You can avoid 2 tests, and then by the time they want a third one, you're already racing in the Olympics, so it doesn't matter. It's just a facade. It's better than anything we've had, so I like it. But you have to pay attention to details. You have to see what they're testing for and how often they're testing.
Yeah, I think in the long run, I think that the promoters and stuff would probably rather the fighters be that way. You get more big knockouts. You get more stuff you can sell, just like baseball in the 90s, where they turned a blind eye to the steroids because it helps. It brings the crowd in. And let's face it, in the end, when you look at this, boxers overall, nobody gives a shit about the boxers. The fans don't. You hear fans call them bums and all this shit. The promoters don't. The matchmakers don't. They get screwed over all the time. When their career is over, there's no governing body, so there's no pension. There's no medical care. So these guys are just cast aside when they're done anyways. So I can kind of see why you would want to do stuff to help maximize the money you can make while you're in the sport, because nobody's going to give a damn about you after you're out of the sport.
You're right, man. You're right. I mean, we've talked to too many guys on this show. I mean, go back and listen to some of the legend shows. I mean, just about every single one of these guys has a story about how they were screwed. I mean,
I don't remember a guy that didn't have a story about how they were screwed.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, we had Baines Martirosian, and that's a much more modern example about how, he got completely screwed. Though, you got to acknowledge that he was also signing with Don King, so that's kind of stupid.
Don King
right
had
there.
a lot to do with that, because probably 75% bitch about Don King, another 20% bitch about Bob Arum, and another 5% bitch about guys like Lou Duva.
Yep. Yeah, it's like you said, man. It's just about all of them have that story.
Yeah, and everybody at some point got screwed out of a big fight that they won that was taken away from them. I mean, and the bad thing is, this is a story that happens again and again. And now with revisionist history, we get stuff like Anthony Joshua and Deontay Wilder, even though they're fighting at the same time, are both getting ready to go on a record title run of title defenses. And Tyson Fury is still running around saying, "I'm the lineal champion." And he's not, and they're not.
We're being hurt. We're being hurt. Let's face it. We don't have a real heavyweight champion, and we've talked about this. People not getting this alphabet belt stuff, and where they don't get it too, that bothers me too. Is if a guy picks up 2 alphabet belts, which we have once in a while, 2 different organizations, but he picks, like, say, one or both of them up off of guys who weren't even that good. Then you've got these people running around saying, these fans who should know better, well, he's a unified champion. Like, if he could just pick up the other 2 belts. And I'm like,
well, see, to me, unified means you're the champion.
Yeah, if the other 2 belts are held by guys that are, like, say, in transnational ring, like 9 or 10 in the division in theory, or they should be there. I mean, what does that matter if you pick up those belts? Like, everybody knows the alphabet organizations are a joke, but then they can't make the distinction that when the alphabet organizations are a joke, if a guy's holding 2 of the belts, that doesn't by itself mean anything, just like Billy Joe Saunders picked up a belt.
How about this, John, for revisionist
anything?
history? John, 1990. Let's say October or the end of 1990. Who was the heavyweight champion?
The end of 1990 would have been Holyfield, right?
Yeah, because he beat Buster Douglas, who beat Mike Tyson. If you go to Box Rec and their Ring Magazine annual ratings, do you know that every year for 1990, they list the heavyweight championship as vacant now? Because, of course, in 1990, I think Francesco Damiani was the WBO champion, and then Ray Mercer was later on. But every year here, they have the title as vacant. In 1990 and 91, Evander Holyfield was the heavyweight champion, if people don't know. In 1992, at the end of the year, Riddick Bowe was, because he beat Evander Holyfield. And see, the thing is, now they're going back, and they're changing things, acting like the WBO mattered.
Yeah, I got to admit the ring's not doing that, but so is box recs. I don't look at those box. I agree with Jeremiah.
I don't either. I just looked at it to find something to bitch about, to tell you the truth, John.
No, but I hate it too. No, I do hate that because some people look at that. But I agree with Jeremiah. The only thing that box rec has a tiny bit of use for to me, except looking at a guy's actual record, which it is used for that, but their rankings is like Jeremiah said. If you get below like the top 30, which their top 30 will be wacky, but when you get into these really high numbers, sometimes they are semi-accurate. Like it does give you an idea of really how bad a guy is a lot of times. Like, he'll be up to 400 in the middleweight division or something. That's kind of accurate sometimes.
And how about this? You thought this group of heavyweights could be as good as the 90s. Let's just pick a year.
I think that has that potential.
1997. This was the top 10. Evander Holyfield, Lennox Lewis, Michael Moore, Ray Mercer, Tim Witherspoon, George Foreman, Shannon Briggs, Ike Ibeabuchi, David Tua, and David Izon. I don't think there's any chance that our top 10 now matches up with that, and I don't think there's any chance that it will.
Well, I mean, the top 10 right now might not match up with that exactly at its highest potential, but I think that, again, these guys are not, well, let's just say this, since it was at least within the last 6 months or so, Wilder and Fury did fight. Now, it's a big disappointment to me that the rematch hasn't happened. And I'm not saying it's all Joshua, but Joshua hasn't fought either of those two yet. These guys do all need to fight. I think if those guys would all need to fight, I mean, who knows? It might be Anthony Joshua that comes out on top. We're not there, but let's just say Anthony Joshua beat Fury and Wilder.
He's never going to be Evander Holyfield.
No, he's not going to be Evander Holyfield in the whole career, but, I mean, could he be a Lennox Lewis?
No.
If he beat those guys?
No.
I don't
John,
think
he's going to beat Lennox Lewis.
No, I'm not saying he's going to beat him. I'm just saying, could he be like the modern equivalent of like what Lennox Lewis was in the 90s?
No, because Lennox Lewis was an all-time great heavyweight. Anthony Joshua was never going to be that. Deontay Wilder is never going to be that.
Mike, you know this because you were there for it at the time. All kinds of people. We laugh at it now, but I remember it, and I was at the fight going into the first Holyfield fight. There were still, and we laugh at this, but I remember it specifically. There were still people who even were relatively knowledgeable who were saying Lennox Lewis is a bum. He's soft. You remember all that? Come on.
Yeah, but see, this is the thing.
The way this stuff goes.
Number one, it doesn't matter because Lennox Lewis had already accomplished more than Anthony Joshua ever would by 1998 or 99, whenever it was. I mean, he'd beaten guys like Ray Mercer. I think it was a really close fight that could have went either way. But Lennox
people were
Lewis,
screaming he should have lost. I was at that one, but I thought Lewis pulled it out. But
I thought it was really close.
Fight.
I thought he won by a point or two. But Ray Mercer was a damn good heavyweight. I think Ray Mercer would walk through all three of these guys. I think Fury could give him trouble, but he's eventually going to catch him, especially the Mercer the night that he knocked out Tommy Morrison.
But I'm thinking about the Mercer the night he lost to Jesse Ferguson.
Yeah, but that was fixed, remember? So that
I mean, that was pathetic.
Yeah, but you know what? If you're getting paid enough, I'd take a damn dive.
He got his head boxed off by a 42-year-old Larry Holmes.
But it was, but a 42-year-old Larry Holmes, you got to remember this about it. That was the same Ray Mercer at the time who was coming off a controversial split decision win on that Leonard Duran 3 undercard against Osvaldo Ocasio. So I don't think that was anywhere near his best, and I don't think Mercer was a great fighter. But if you put Ray Mercer in the ring with Deontay Wilder, the big problem there is Mercer in his prime could take a freaking shot. And I don't think he's going anywhere, and I think Mercer walks through him and knocks him out. I think he walks through Joshua and knocks him out. But the problem is this. Mercer was the 5th or 6th best heavyweight there, so who are we going to put him up against? Joseph Parker, if you want to compare it?
Yeah, I like to harken back, but I mean, I don't think, I'm going to say it because I don't think Ray Mercer is beating Fury, Joshua, Wilder. Now, I agree with you. If he walked through Joshua and Wilder's punches, which is not impossible with Mercer's chin, he might.
Tommy Morrison hit harder than either one of those guys, and Tommy Morrison didn't dent him.
No, Tommy Morrison didn't. He was hitting him with some good shots, and Morrison could punch. And, Morrison was a good fighter and had good hand speed. It's you have different matchups on different nights, but I think these guys could also certainly, beat a Ray Mercer. And remember Lennox Lewis, even though and he's a arguably a top 10 heavyweight of all time, but you had moments where he got stopped by Oliver McCall. I mean, Oliver McCall was a very up and down fighter. There's no doubt about it. I mean, he had a lot of bad losses.
He lost 2 fights his whole career, and he came back and won against those guys immediately and did it very convincingly both times.
He did, but I'm just saying, remember, this all had to play out. So, you had moments where, Lennox Lewis did end up becoming an all-time great. He'd lost to Oliver McCall. Wilder, Joshua, and, Fury haven't even picked up losses yet. Now, they haven't fought the same schedule.
John, real quick, we've got a question from Tim on Twitter. He wants to know if Jeremiah's still there, which I think is my cue to ask Jeremiah, what's your opinion?
So does Tim want to hear me talk? If so,
I just think that maybe he thought you stroke out or something during the show, and me and John just kept going on, and sometimes me and John, when we start having these deep intellectual discussions, forget about you. So go ahead, Jeremiah.
Well, yeah, I mean, I like to hear the way it plays out. And, oftentimes you guys finish up, and then, I got to put my input in there. But, I mean, to a number of points, I mean, you guys are kind of all over the place. Let me see if I can.
Hey, you know why I feel bad? He tweeted it to me like 5 minutes ago. But go ahead.
Yeah, that makes it worse.
Well, anyways, I mean, thank you, Tim. Again, we appreciate all the comments, good or bad, that happen on this. I mean, I got called a racist last night because I said Vasil Lomachenko is number 1 pound for pound.
You got called racist last night? I know you got called racist like 3 or 4 weeks ago, but I didn't remember last night.
Yeah, remember the
okay.
The guy
Okay.
Yeah, he said if you have Vasil Lomachenko pound for pound number 1, basically you're a racist. Anyways, whatever, I'll take that. I'll eat that. I honestly don't give a shit. But the thing is that when you talk about Anthony Joshua and his potential to be a quote-unquote all-time great, I think he has the potential, and I mean this in this way, is the heavyweight division, there's a lot of fluidity once you get outside the top 5. I mean, really, once you get outside Muhammad Ali and Joe Louis.
Oh, you mean all time? Okay, yeah.
Yes, there's a lot of fluidity. I mean, you could say.
I think I could go through 7 or 8 that I think are pretty solid, but after that, I think it's just kind of a cluster.
Yeah, well, this is why I don't really put a lot of emphasis on heavyweights myself, because of just the flimsy records and a lot of the stuff you got to read into it. Again, Ali, Lewis, number 1, number 2. And then
Joe Louis, right?
What?
You mean Joe Louis, right? Because to me, it's Ollie Lewis, and then 3 through 7 is kind of interchangeable. I could see anybody anywhere.
Yeah, and so this is my thing: is when we're talking about the back end there, let me imagine if Anthony Joshua clears out the modern heavyweight division, and then he remains on top. He's the heavyweight champion. And let's say he does something similar to Vladimir Klitschko, but he doesn't get knocked off. I mean, if he happened to string together like a 7-8 year run where he isn't stopped at all, or
I'll give you that. And the same thing for Wilder. If he strings around a 7 or 8 year run, similar, I think, John, to like what Larry Holmes did, where the competition wasn't outstanding, but he dominated for so long, you got to give it to him.
Yeah, and I think that some of these guys. I mean, I just think Vladimir Klitschko's like we said, you could probably try to make a case for him top 10 all time, but he's probably going to settle in around the top 15. But he had a great long run, and his brother ended up proving his worth. But the rest of the guys around weren't that good. I think in this era we weren't there, but I think we're actually starting to enter where some of these other guys may not be great, but they're going to be good. There's going to be some more quality in the top 10 than we've had.
Who do you see that's not in the top 5 or 10 now that could be? And I'm not asking like an asshole. There's a couple guys I think that could be, but for the majority, when I see these guys, I don't think there's more than a couple that may.
Well, we've got guys coming up like a Jagba and Dubois and Hrgovic. And
I'll
then
give you
got,
those three.
You know,
I don't see much past that, though.
yeah, and then you've got guys like, I mean, I don't want to say it because he could turn out to be not that good, but at least Konatsky's interesting. He's hitting with pretty good authority. You've got guys like him at least starting to make their case, starting to move in there. I mean, Parker, we've talked about him a lot. I don't think Parker's that great, but yet Parker is the type of guy that, I've said this before, I think this is going to happen with him. He might be like number 10 for 10 years. He might be number 10 for 10 years. You know what I mean? Like, I think he's going to be around. I don't think Dillian White's that good, but, he's had some interesting fights lately.
He's not, but that means he's top 5 right now, John. That's my point.
That part needs to be strengthened up a bit. I think we're in the process, but yeah, we're not. When you think, and that is with the ring and transnational, that to me is I got to say it. I got to be fair. That is a glaring weakness to me. When you've got a Dillian White
see it when
in the
you
ring
say
at
that.
4 and transnational at 4.
When you say that it could be like the 90s, I think with the top 3, we don't know what they are yet. It's possible. Fury's a really good boxer. Wilder can bang. Joshua can do a little bit of everything, a little robotic at times, but all 3 of them, there's the potential. I just don't see the potential in anybody else below that other than a Jogba, Hervik, and maybe Dubois.
Yeah, I think I'm looking at we're getting better, but when I think about, I can't argue with it in the sense that, the ring and transnational have Dillian White 4, even if I might disagree. That's not getting, that's got a ways to go yet. But I think it's just that, and I'm not debating the ability of Klitschko at all, or Vitaly or Vladimir, but that era was just, that was just bad.
But how about this? If you go to 2008, if you go to 2008, I think the top 3 are better than the top 3 now. You had Vladimir Vitaly, Ruslan Chagayev. Number 4 was Alexander Povetkin. Number 6 was Sultan Ibragimov, who I think was a solid fighter. 7, you had Sam Peter, who could punch. That was about it. 8 was Oleg Moskayev. 9 was Juan Carlos Gomez. 10 was Alexander Dimitriko. Does he still fight? Because doesn't he fight like every 3 weeks? Or is that, maybe I'm thinking of Ustinov. But when I look at that, I think you had right there 5 or 6 solid guys.
He's the guy that John Ruiz just took out.
John Ruiz?
Yeah, exactly.
You mean Andy Ruiz? Okay.
Yeah.
That's right. That's where I heard that damn name. Gosh. So he was in the top 10 years ago.
Andy Ruiz just took out.
Yeah. Well, John Ruiz, did he ever knock anybody out?
Yeah, no, he stopped a few people. But, yeah, man. No,
I think he held them till they fell asleep, and then he dropped them, and they counted to 10.
No, but there were some solid years during Klitschko's reign. But, I mean, again, Vladimir and Vitaly compared to the guys now, I think they're clearly better. I think there's a lot of proving to do for all of these guys. And, again, I think that, Povetkin was obviously a rock-solid fighter. I know John and I go, we have, we talk about this sometimes. But here's the thing about Povetkin, right? The dude has been ranked in the top 10 for, 11 out of the last 10 years, or 12, 11 out of the last 10 or something like that.
Since 2007.
Yes, ever since, I think, when he beat Chris Bird, who was the top 10 guy of the year before, he beat Chris Bird in his 14th fight. I mean, this dude's been ranked top 10 or top 5 for 8 or 9 of those years as well. I mean,
yeah, he was top 5 from 2008 to about 3 years ago.
Well, and he beat Ruslan Chagayev, who Vladimir Klitschko beat to win the lineal title. So, I mean, to me, I don't think there's any dispute that, Alexander Povetkin was a rock-solid heavyweight. I mean, in his prime, I might pick him to beat Dillian White as of this moment. Again, I'd have some reservations about that because of the state of Dillian White right now.
Well, I think a prime Povetkin would give all 3 of these guys trouble.
Yeah, I absolutely agree.
I mean, I think Povetkin's a much better fighter than White. I mean, there's no doubt about it.
I think this
Povetkin was better than
2009
all those
Povetkin.
other-
2009 Povetkin is better than any of the three guys that claim to be champion.
I think stylistically, he would have a real tough time with Tyson Fury because of his length. But Anthony Joshua, again, I know
gave
John
Joshua
didn't
trouble
think much
last year.
Yeah, you look at most people's scorecards before the stoppage in the round, and most people had it like 3-3 going in. I mean, and we're talking about a way past at Alexander Povetkin at this point. So again, I think he was fully capable of beating a lot of guys. And had he not had the Klitschko's, I'm not saying it's him who's reigning for a decade or so, but I would pick him to become the heavyweight champion of the world.
If it wasn't for the Klitschko's, if you make him the champion in 2007 or 8, he may have reigned for 8 or 9 years. There's not a whole lot else there from 2009 on.
No, there's not.
That's almost how I see him in a way. I mean, I think, with Povetkin, I think that he was better than that weak era of challengers below the Klitschko's. That's just kind of funny. It's almost like you had the two Klitschko's. Then you had Povetkin was clearly below them, but better than those other guys. But see, to me, like style matchup, I don't think Povetkin ever beats the top three guys now.
Oh, I think Povetkin would have walked through Wilder. I think he's technically too good, and he can take a shot. He's not going anywhere in his prime, no matter who hits him. I don't think
he performed miserably when he fought Vladimir Klitschko.
Yeah, but so would all three of these guys against the prime Klitschko.
You can't say with Wilder's reach and power that Povetkin.
But he has no boxing ability.
In there and he's getting through.
He can
use the 1-2. He could very well keep Povetkin outside and take him out. Povetkin, he got taken out by Joshua. I didn't think Joshua really got any particular trouble with him.
He was a little old then, John. We're talking about 10 years ago, Povetkin.
He was, but Povetkin's not that tall of a heavyweight. There's style problems for him with the big guys that you have nowadays, which Wilder, Fury, and Joshua all fit that bill. And that's where I just don't think he's ever beaten any of those guys.
Jeremiah?
Yeah, well, I mean, again, I think the big flaws in Wilder. But again, with Fury, I think is tough because just how long he is. But of course, there's still flaws there. I mean, I wouldn't rule it out altogether because even Tyson Fury has shown some flaws. I mean, do we really know what Tyson Fury is? I mean, he got dropped by an overhand right, which Alexander Povetkin is actually pretty adept at throwing.
Yeah.
I mean, he's been fighting.
Hell, he got dropped by Steve Cunningham.
Well, yeah, and that's right. That's what I was going to bring up. And again, I think John is right in saying that he has some limitations against tall guys, but Vladimir Klitschko, to me, is out of all of these guys, Vladimir Klitschko, to me, is clearly the best at utilizing his length. He has a consistent jab. He threw a straighter right hand. I think a much better right hand than Deontay Wilder, much straighter. Technically, it was better. His accuracy was superior, and he also used it in the sense that Wilder doesn't. Where you look at the Klitschko and Povetkin fight, he would throw the 1-2 or the 1, and then he just grabbed Povetkin. I mean, like Emmanuel Stewart taught him and Lennox Oz to do, and obviously it was it was a good tactic. But it's not as if Fury, like I said, Fury has shown some limitations too. I mean, he did get dropped by Steve Cunningham. That's not the only time that he's been dropped either. And he does get a little too flashy with his defense. I don't know. There's just, I'm like you, Mike. I still think there are a lot of questions surrounding these guys. And until they fight one another, though we did get Wilder and Tyson Fury, and I do think that did answer some questions. So, of course, I'm like a lot of people where I'd like to see the rematch. But I just want to see all these guys fight one another so we don't have to ask questions like this. So we just need some clarity. Everybody does.
Yeah, and I don't think we're ever going to get it. Maybe someday.
Well, and I'm kind of hoping that, again, with the state of things, sometimes I hope that it doesn't happen. I mean, I know a lot of people would like to see these guys fight one another, but I wouldn't have been upset if Brazil beat Wilder, if Ruiz beats Joshua, and if Schwartz beat Fury. I mean, in a way, I kind of would have liked that.
If Schwartz beats
Schwartz.
Fury, that would be the biggest shock of all. I would have been less surprised by Dominic Brazil or Andy Ruiz winning than Tom Schwartz, because still, he does my taxes, I'm pretty sure.
And Schwartz is going in by far the biggest underdog too. So the odds
because he's by far the worst fighter to 3. I don't know if you can be worse than Brazil, but he would be at least even. I think Brazil is probably a favorite to beat Tom Schwartz. I put it like this: could you imagine announcing and new?
Brazil can punch.
Just think of this though: if Tom Schwartz wins, then we're going to hear an announcer go, "And the new lineal heavyweight champion of the world." Tom Schwartz.
Well,
you're giving me flashbacks to Briggs getting that gift against George Foreman.
Yeah, but you know what? At least his name was Shannon the Cannon Briggs. It wasn't Tom freaking Schwartz.
Yeah, I mean, like I said last time.
Hey, and I will give Shannon Briggs this.
PI,
I will give Shannon Briggs this, though. His title defense against Lennox Lewis, he did come to fight, and that was an entertaining fight until he ran out of gas and Lewis smoked his ass in the 5th.
It was crazy, wild, entertaining, but I didn't think Briggs was ever in it myself. But
I don't either, but I think he fought hard. He landed some punches, and he wasn't a bitch the way Tom Schwartz is probably going to be. Well, and I don't mean Tom Schwartz is a bitch. I just mean he's not a very good fighter, so it's not going to be a very good fight.
Well, and I want to touch on something real quick. So if Tom Schwartz upsets Tyson Fury, how many people are saying that Tyson Fury is the lineal champion of the world? How many people would honor the claim of Tom Schwartz? You know, I don't know. That seems a little bit flimsy.
You know what? If Tom Schwartz wins, I'm considering him the lineal heavyweight champion of the world. What the hell? Why not?
He's taking the torch.
I mean, shit, he beat Tyson Fury if he does. Deontay Wilder didn't beat Tyson Fury. Anthony Joshua's not fighting him, so shit. Let's just make Tom Schwartz the lineal heavyweight champion of the world, and of course you know where this goes. His first title defense should be against Manuel Char.
Yep.
I'm not going to predict it, but the way boxing is, we are almost due for something wacky like that to happen.
Yeah, but I don't think it's going to happen, because I think this. I've seen Tom Schwartz a couple times, but is there any way that he could knock out Tyson Fury?
Yeah, there's a way.
How?
I mean,
if he uses a baseball bat or a shotgun? And I don't think Fury takes that good of a punch. So.
Yeah, you only need to land one.
The thing that's good about this is, believe me, I'm not picking Tom Schwartz. Don't just for what you're saying.
Well, you picked that Sherbransky that one time, John. What the hell?
Maybe make him win.
I think John's calling me names, but I can't hear him because his phone's breaking up real bad.
Okay, no, just saying that Tom. I'm actually still here. Just that Tom. The one thing that maybe, again, I'm not picking him. I'm not saying he has a chance, but at least Tom Schwartz isn't old. So sometimes if they miscalculated him, you know, he's not over the hill. He's young. So, you know, maybe if you want to hope for something wacky, that's what I would say.
He's young, but the problem I see is this. I followed the heavyweight division pretty good, you know, hoping for the old days. And when I look at this, he is ranked 8th in Germany on BoxRec. Did you know that, Jeremiah? 8 out of 67. No. He's ranked 57th overall. And I don't think I've ever heard of anybody he's ever fought. And
he's a Euro level guy. I mean, I don't understand why they picked Schwartz at all. I mean, they should have just went with some American guy.
Hey, I just figured it out though. He did win the vacant WBC Youth World Heavyweight title when he beat Dennis Lewandowski by a unanimous decision.
Well, hey, it all makes sense now. Well, now he's in the big time and he's fighting for the lineal heavyweight championship of the world. So. Hail King Schwartz.
I do agree with Jeremiah. Though we know how bad the real deep depth is, because we're still, I think, in heavyweight making some progress, but still a long way to go. But yeah, you think the marketing things are somewhat of a head scratcher. Like, yeah, you're bringing in this German guy to fight Fury on ESPN Plus in the United States when we're supposed to be building Fury's American profile.
And Chris Arreola would have been a better choice.
Yeah, he literally would have been. Though that's what's crazy about
I know. That's why I said it, John. I wasn't kidding.
Yeah, it's just that's the thing. If PBC has a lot of flaws, but there's some things, if they just keep doing what they're doing, they're just going to outdistance the other guys because of things like we're talking about.
Who's going to outdistance who? You lost me for a second.
He said PBC.
PBC's just going to outdistance the competition just because these little types of things we're talking about, that even though, including PBC, the overall boxing viewership that I see is down, even with hardcore fans, but you get hundreds of thousands more literally watching a PBC thing than you're going to have watching Fury Schwartz, where maybe if you threw an American guy in there against Fury, you might at least alleviate some of that.
I think from what we've seen, there's not going to be big ratings for any heavyweights fighting each other, except for the top three fighting each other.
Well, and I wanted to say that John's statement was brought to you by PBC.
Yeah, because he is a shill for PBC, and he just proved it. And
I had to get that in there, Al.
And I'll tell you this, John. I will give you this, John. The direct messages I'm getting for questions for you right now about the statement you just made would blow your mind. And I will also say this. A lot of the things that they ask, I can't say over the air.
No,
that's okay.
You have a lot of people that think you're a shill for PBC, really, don't you? Here we go.
Yeah, that's.
Do you want one? I'm going to give you one.
Sure.
Here we go. This is from Hamed. Is John on the PBC payroll, and why does he compare ESPN numbers to DAZN for Canelo Jacobs and Beater BF Hot Rod when DAZN is a new app?
Oh, well, that was just, I had just told people that when, I don't have any problem explaining that, and I ended up being right, which a lot of people didn't like. I don't know if Hamed, I don't think he particularly disputed it, but, it's that I was saying that, which ended up happening, that the limitations of DAZN, and this is what, I think some of the people in the UK and Europe, they don't realize, we're talking about U.S. market here. It's nothing where you're trying to knock DAZN. It's just what people are going to see. And I was saying that Beterbiev and Kalajdzic is actually going to be seen probably by more people on ESPN in the U.S. than are going to actually end up seeing Canelo Jacobs on DAZN. And people were saying that's preposterous. It can't possibly happen. That's absurd. You're a shill for PBC. You hate DAZN. And what happened? The Beterbiev fight ended up peaking at 675,000 at DAZN by their own numbers for Canelo. When they counted 2 subscriptions per house, would have been two streams per house was at 600,000 streams. So it was just a point of not quote unquote hating on DAZN or anything, just that for the sport of boxing, I mean, Canelo's supposed to be the biggest star. You're not getting seen, and that's not, DAZN's not generating pay-per-view dollars either, so it's not one of those types of exceptions. And, where's the sport going to go with that? That's all. I mean, I just made a prediction. I said it'd be real close. I thought both of them would be a little bit higher, but the Beterbiev Kalajdzic fight did just end up edging it out. And I don't think that's really overall good for boxing. But I'm not blaming anybody for not signing up for DAZN for it. It's just that's the problem with boxing in the U.S. when you get limited to an app only.
We have question number 2 from Hamed for John. Don't feel left out, Jeremiah. There's no questions for me when John's on either. Question number 2.
I'm glad I get this attention.
Do you think Deontay Wilder hits harder than George Foreman and Mike Tyson? Have read on various Facebook groups, many, especially his fanboys, believe so. Shake my head. So, let's do this. We're going to start off with Jeremiah. Jeremiah, does Deontay Wilder hit harder than George Foreman and Mike Tyson?
Yeah, I mean, punch for punch, I think it's possible that if we're talking about the single right hand, I think you could compare his power to Mike Tyson. I mean, Mike Tyson was obviously a very powerful hitter, but I also think that was a combination of speed and accuracy and again putting this stuff together. But in terms of single punches, I mean, it's hard to tease out the details for that. But I would favor George Foreman as a puncher. I would probably favor Ernie Shavers. There have just been so many huge punchers in the division that I really find it hard to tease out the details. But I don't think there's any doubt that
my details on Foreman come to this: he knocked out Joe Frazier in 2 rounds.
Right? Yeah. I mean, and also, I mean, you look at just the sheer amount of one-punch knockout artists.
Yeah. Even at the age of 45, he was knocking out legit heavyweights.
Yeah, I mean, but again, you look at just the plethora of these guys like Ernie Shavers and Tommy Morrison and guys of that nature, Curtis, the Hatchet Man Shepherd and Joe Louis is obviously a very big puncher and there have been tons of them throughout heavyweight history. So I find it hard to say exactly who's the hardest ever. Obviously, most people would say Shavers, but I think Wilder's power is comparable to Mike Tyson's. Again, I think they're different types of punchers there.
Yeah. I think this. I think that Tyson was a harder puncher because of the leverage Tyson got. And I think Tyson's leverage came from below, where I think Wilder's punches just come from the leverage he gets from being bigger than everybody else. John, what do you think?
Yeah, I'm not ready to say Wilder is a bigger puncher than Tyson and Foreman yet, but I think with what he's shown, I wouldn't say it's crazy. In other words, we'll have to see maybe just how it plays out a little longer. Where I just think that is part of the nature of what you get today with guys not fighting as often and not having as tough of fights. We haven't seen it against the same level of opposition as those guys, but yet with the kind of shots Wilder's landed and the kind of knockouts he scored. I mean, let's face it, Liakovic was done and past his prime, but you got to remember that sight of his leg is just twitching on the canvas in the first round when he got caught, and Spielka just getting laid out, and now Brazil. Now, yeah, again, I'm not ready. I'm not going to say at this point. I wouldn't say he's a harder puncher than Foreman or Tyson, but I think we can leave the book open for him, where we can't say maybe when we look at his whole career, we might not look back at it and say maybe he does compare favorably with those guys, but I'm not ready to say that yet at this point.
I will unequivocally say there's no way he hits as hard as George Foreman and Ernie Shavers, because they knocked out people that could take punches. They knocked out people that were good fighters. And Deontay Wilder is never going to get that chance, I don't think, because I don't think there's going to be anybody that good there for him to fight. And I know Ernie Shavers got knocked out by some people like Jerry Quarry. But I think Jerry Quarry would have whipped all these guys, too. I think Jerry Quarry was a bad dude. He just was a heavyweight at the wrong time. And I'll tell you this. I would rather Deontay Wilder hit me than catch that hook from Jerry Cooney. Ask Ken Norton, because that's about the scariest knockout I've ever seen. When Norton gets caught in the ropes and Cooney is just wailing on him and Norton can't fall down because of the ropes. There's been a lot of tremendous punchers in the heavyweight division. And a lot of those guys, like Ernie Shavers, weren't particularly great fighters. They were just big punchers. But I'll always give it to Ernie Shavers, because I'll go back to this. George Foreman, Larry Holmes, Muhammad Ali, all said, and I know Foreman didn't fight Shavers, but he did spar with him. We talked about it on the show when we had him on. All three of those guys all said that by far Ernie Shavers was the hardest punch they'd ever been hit with. So when guys like Ali and them are saying that, and Frazier, I'm going to tend to just believe that he's probably the hardest puncher there's been.
Yeah. Yeah, well, and again, it's tough to really, again, I remember seeing some sparring partner who, he sparred Tua, George Foreman, Vladimir Klitschko, and I think when you read his evaluation of these guys, I think he kind of gets to the heart of the issue that a lot of these guys are just kind of different kinds of punchers, where Foreman was a bit more
thudded on your ass and you felt it forever.
Yeah, well, and he actually said, I mean, of course, this was an older Foreman that he sparred, so I don't think it counts as much, but, he did say Klitschko was the hardest that he had ever been hit, and that's including David Tua. But, of course, Tua, it's like one of those things that a lot of times, it does – it's hard to just gauge, like, what metric is there actually for David Tua's left hook compared to Deontay Wilder's right hand. I mean, you look at the destruction of John Ruiz, and you realize the dude was a one-punch kind of guy, but it's just different types of stuff. I mean, Klitschko was very technical. He had good accuracy. Tua was kind of a one-punch kind of guy. But a lot of times you'll hear from the fighters themselves that, if they fought, Julian Jackson, for instance, well, Jackson might be a bad example, but there are a lot of times where you look at a guy's career and you're like, well, what's the hardest you've ever been hit? And they're like, oh, well, it's some guy, way back when I was young or something, because a lot of time it's dependent upon the timing itself. Like maybe punch for punch you might not hit as hard as somebody else, but if you catch them with good timing.
How about this real quick? When we talk about this and guys that may have done it way back, Larry Holmes, when I talked to him, hardest he ever hit was Ernie Shavers. You know who the second hardest puncher he ever fought was?
I don't know, the white guy who beat him in the amateur ranks?
Yeah, Nick Wells. He said Nick Wells had the same kind of punching power as Jerry Cooney. And he said both of those guys, they hit you and you felt it forever. And who was it that made this statement? I don't remember who it was, but one of the guys that fought Ernie Shavers made the statement that when Ernie hit you, he could break your ankles. He hit you so hard.
It was Tex Cobb.
That's right.
Holmes got knocked out by Bobbitt in the Olympic trials. So a lot of times guys have pride. They don't like to talk about stuff like that. That's why he's talking about Nick Wells.
I'm on the boxing
show right now live. Yeah, no, that's right. I mean, Wells, I think Holmes in the interview talked a bit more privately about Wells than some of the other fights. But you're right. I mean, and sometimes these guys give credit. I think sometimes they're hard. You got to be careful with some of these guys too, because I think sometimes their heart's not always in the right place. They don't want to give a particular guy the credit he deserves. Again, it's all a cautionary tale, and it's hard to tease out the details as to who actually is better than the others. But again, the division is littered with them, partly because the human body is not meant to take a punch from a guy that big.
Yeah. Which is why a guy like Tom Schwartz can always get lucky.
Wilder has dropped or stopped at this point every guy he's ever faced.
That's pretty exciting. Unfortunately, he hadn't faced anybody any good yet. The best fighters he's fought was a really old Luis Ortiz, and I'm sorry, he didn't beat Tyson Fury. He knocked him down, but he didn't stop him.
No,
and Steve Cunningham knocked him down too.
But it's just that as Wilder, his career goes on and he's already well into it. But, again, how it plays out, that's something that it's still unusual. Even with the level of opposition, it's still pretty unusual. I mean, the guy has dropped or stopped everybody he's faced.
Yeah. Okay. Well, and I think we also got to admit that.
How about this? Rocky Marciano beat everybody he faced.
Well, Rocky Marciano was a great puncher. There's no doubt about it.
Yeah, a greater puncher than Wilder.
I mean, Rocky Marciano is certainly in that conversation, so I'm not going to...
The picture, I still think the most iconic knockout in heavyweight history was that 13th round hook that he threw off of Jersey Joe Walcott's face. I saw that picture so much when I was little, I can close my eyes and see... I don't even have to close my eyes to see Walcott's face all scrunched up against Marciano's fist. And I think Marciano is extremely underrated. And I generally think, in the end, I think my biggest problem with this entire heavyweight division is how stupid each one of the three's fans are. I mean, I get so tired of hearing, well, now Anthony Joshua will be afraid of Deontay Wilder. Ain't none of them afraid of each other. They're all professional fighters. Chances are they all want to fight each other. It's the people that run this shit that's stopping it. And it's old and it's stupid and I'm tired of it. I mean, just let them fight.
Yeah,
come on.
Yeah, it's just turned into a bunch of gossip, man. It's like turned into a bunch of tribal gossip. It's annoying.
Yeah, and I did
No,
not
it's
see.
true, but I agree. But it's the problem. No, I actually agree, but it's the problem. That's where I find frustration. It's the problem with the sport. Yeah, that's the problem with the sport
Yeah,
right
and
now.
the problem is this,
we,
though. The fighters don't realize this, but Deontay Wilder, Anthony Joshua, Tyson Fury all hold the key to be able to fight each other. All they got to do is stand up and say, we're not fighting anybody until you let me fight him, and I don't care what you pay me. Because at some point, this has got to be more about being the man than how much money you make. Because let's face it, no matter what they're getting paid, they're going to be rich beyond their wildest freaking dreams if they are the one to emerge out of these three. And the problem is, it's more about money to all three of them, or they'd stand up and say this. I mean, we remember in the past, John, where there was promoters that didn't want a fight to happen, and the fighters would say, no, we're doing this shit. Either get on board or get out of the way. And they won't do that anymore.
Think that I want the fighters to make as much as possible and be secure, but I do think that that's a little bit that is underrated, is that only at the very, very highest levels of boxing, because it does not happen often, but I agree. When you get to the levels these guys are at, there is a certain point, and money's great and everything, but it's true. I mean, they don't really need any more money. In other words, yeah, it's nice to make it in pride, but there does get to a certain level, right, where it's then, hey, you got to look at other legacy factors because this is your profession and you've made enough. It doesn't mean you want to let the promoters pay you less or anything, but it's just that you've got enough at a certain point.
I mean, am I wrong here, or haven't all these guys made at least $30 or $40 million apiece by now?
That's the thing, you don't know the exact rate, but when it gets to a certain point, then they should really say, hey, I gotta look at legacy as well.
And the thing is this: if you look at legacy and you win, it's just like we talked 2 years ago. If when they offered Wilder $12 million, he'd have taken that fight and beat Joshua and knocked him out, he would be freaking off the hook huge right now. He would have got a rematch where he would have got A-side money, and if he wins that, he'd have got A-side money against Fury, and he would be beyond big right now. At some point, you got to be willing to take a risk and take a little bit short money, because I'm sorry, where I live at, $12 million is a pretty good payday. I'll take that chance, especially if that can turn into, $100 million a year from now if I whip that dude's ass. And the same thing if I'm Joshua. Right now, if I fight if I fight Wilder and I knock his ass out in the first round, and if it's me, I'm doing it at Madison Square Garden, or I'm doing it at Caesar's Palace in Vegas, my ass blows up in the United States too, and I'm already huge overseas. And the same thing with Fury. If you would have came back and beat Wilder, and I still think this, I think the only reason Wilder and Fury fought is because with the problems Fury had, I think Wilder thought he was getting a soft touch. I do. I completely think he was getting a soft touch. I also think this. I don't think Fury was completely ready for that fight, but got through it, did enough where the majority of people thought he won a close fight. But I think Fury realizes he wasn't completely ready, and he doesn't want to go in with that power again until he's sure he's got his ducks in a row, which is why you get the 2 fights now. And I do believe Fury would fully fight Wilder early next spring after he's had those 2 fights to get ready. I think that's what happened there. That's just my opinion.
No, I don't think that, but I think that,
So you don't, wait a second now, because I think we all kind of thought that Fury was a soft touch when he fought Wilder, because he hadn't fought in 3 years. He'd been in a cocaine and Big Mac stupor for 3 years and gained 100 extra pounds. I don't think for a second anybody thought we were going to see the best of Tyson Fury.
Well, the odds makers had to fight close to even money going in.
So yeah, because people are going to bet they're going to set the odds to get equal money bet on the fighters. They're not picking a winner.
But you got to have people then of that opinion that Fury could beat Wilder.
Yeah, and there were. They're called people from the UK. And they bet a lot of money.
And the fight ended up being razor close, so the odds makers had it right on. I don't think that Fury won the fight.
I know you don't, because you're going to just go with the party line with PBC and Deontay Wilder.
No, it's just what I saw. But I think, look, here, the problem is that financially it is kind of working out for these guys. But I do agree then with the things like the Bo Lewis comparison and the Pacquiao Mayweather happening too late is, we don't want to miss these fights. We got a good fight with Fury Wilder. We could have a good round robin with Fury and Josh, and we don't want to miss it. And we know heavyweights and boxing can have wacky things, and there might be an upset. And I agree with Jeremiah. You get to a point where you get mad, and then you start rooting for the underdog sometimes. But, on the other hand, you hate to miss these good fights with undefeated guys.
Yeah, but let's face it, if Tom
Schwartz for a long time.
or Andy Ruiz upsets one of these guys, it wasn't that big a fight anyway.
Well, that's the way people then start perceiving it, but it becomes after the fact. In other words, if they wouldn't have lost, we wouldn't have looked at it that way. So,
but see, the way I look at it is this: I think they're competitive fights, but I don't really give a shit, and I'm not paying $100 for it because I don't think it ever worth paying $100 to see fight. I mean, I paid $70 to see Mikey Garcia fight Errol Spence, which may be the reason why I wouldn't pay $100 to see this, because maybe I learned my lesson finally.
But that's becoming it's a problem with boxing. You hope when it's a fight's big enough that everybody wants to see, you hope that they feel that it's worth the pay-per-view money, and you get a good fight. But you don't want too many pay-per-views. I mean, I'd like to not have pay-per-view. I mean, I know DAZN is marketing that, but I don't think that that's really where it's going. I mean, they've given one pay-per-view quality fight so far, and there's none other scheduled. So, you can probably guess where that's going to go. I mean, the idea would be nice in theory, but
DAZN had a pay-per-view worthy fight.
Pay-per-views. Well, that was supposed to be Canelo Jacobs.
Oh, okay. That wasn't pay-per-view worthy. I would have paid to see it, but I wouldn't have paid $80 to see it. I would have paid $39.95. And that's the other thing I don't understand, because I would be all right with the DAZN pay-per-view and paying $10 a month, but the pay-per-view's $20. And just like in England, there comes a point, are you better with 2 million people watching it at $20 a pop? Or are you better with 300,000 people paying $100 a pop?
I agree. I've always thought for a long time, try the other. Steven Espinosa is pretty candid about these things, and he had a long interview about it a few months ago, and he's claiming, of course, this could be BS though too, but I've seen Aram say similar type stuff. That they're claiming that they can't lower the price point.
It's bullshit, because more people are going to buy it.
I know.
I mean, if 4 million people paid $100 to see Pacquiao and Mayweather, how many people do you think would have paid $20?
I mean, you'd like to see it tried. I mean, it could be just a front. They're claiming it won't work, and they've got to keep this price point set.
How about this? I'll compare it to
service.
this. I coached arena football in Evansville, Indiana, and the first 3 games of the season, we charged $35 for the lower level tickets, and we averaged selling 600 tickets a game. The last 3 games, since the owner bailed out of town because he was in debt and losing his money, we lowered the ticket prices to $10 a game, and we had 3,000 people show up. That's making more money than if you're charging $30 and getting 300 or 400.
That's true. People care about paying money. They'll usually go for things less expensive, but then they claim that they want people conditioned, to having to pay a certain amount. I've always thought, I mean, I'd like to see a lot less pay-per-view and just, save it for the occasional true super fight where that probably would work. But I just think we're heading for paying for even more stuff. That's what I don't like. And I don't think it's just the pay-per-views.
I don't know that we are, because I think we're getting to the point where they're not going to be able to charge pay-per-view because nobody's paying for it anymore. We had a supposed heavyweight title fight that did 300,000 buys. If that continues, they can't continue to pay these guys the exorbitant rates. And I think that DAZN is in it for the long haul worldwide, which is why you get the big contract they get with Major League Baseball for that little change-up thing they do. So I think this is more of a global plan. It's not a boxing plan. And I think in the end, if they don't change the way they're doing things, you can have all the pay-per-views you want, but nobody's going to pay for them.
No, I don't think that might happen. It might happen with the zones of subscriptions. I agree that the other way it could go is either we're just going to have occasional pay-per-view or maybe, like you see, like I've said, and I think there's definitely is a trend, you see the boxing viewership per event dropping. Let's face it, if it keeps dropping, they're not going to be able to charge much for the zone, pay-per-views, ESPN Plus or whatever, because there's just not going to be many people watching.
Yeah, and then you're going to have the promoters not making much money, the boxers not making much money, and this is all, in the past, it's been cyclical, where you get, in the early 60s, Benny the Kid Paret dies, they start taking out the Friday night fights and all that, and then you get Ali brings it back. You know, the success of Rocky, Sugar Ray Leonard, everything's going great. The mid-'80s, you get Mike Tyson. Everything's going great. You get into the 90s, you got Holyfield, you got Lewis, you got De La Hoya, Trinidad, all these guys. You get into the 2000s, though, starts to die off. But you get Pacquiao, you still got De La Hoya, you got Mayweather, but Mayweather left, and now we got nothing. And the reason we have nothing is because the guys that are available now are either don't want to fight each other, or more than likely, the people that run everything, the promoters and all that, choose to play it safe to try to keep their zero intact. And the only hope here is cyclically we can get somebody that is a mega star, but it's going to be hard to do because since Olympic boxing is went in a shitter, since free TV boxing is pretty much went in a shitter, especially young guys developing on free TV, I think this makes it so cyclically we could be in a serious problem here if things don't change soon.
I think we're in it.
Well, yeah. I mean, yeah, that's the way it is. But unfortunately, you're just getting more division because of not only the TV things, but like you said, you talked about guys wanting to protect their O or promoters want to protect zeros on records. I think part of that is not just the fact that they like to, have these guys have shiny records, but also because they want to keep their money as much in-house as they can, so they make sure that their guys are, keep generating wins.
Oh, I think it's 80% of that and 20% of the O.
Yeah, and that's the thing is, I'm going back to Vanes Martirosyan once again because he said these fighters nowadays, they're yes men, okay? And why wouldn't they be? Because they're getting paid top dollar to like you look at Gary Russell Jr. and he's beating up Kiko Martinez, who's been losing to lesser opposition for over a decade. I mean, when you can make that much money, fighting these type of guys, Leo Santa Cruz is getting paid, I think, much more than what he's worth, and again, why would you say no to that? Why would you say, even Danny Garcia's dad talked about it where he's like, well, why would I fight Keith Thurman for, $8 million when I can fight Mauricio Herrera for $4 or whatever it is? That shows you the kind of mindset that some of these guys have. And it's not going to change. It's not ever going to change if something drastic doesn't happen. I'm waiting for some white knight to come along and break the wheel. Turn this thing upside down. I'm a bit more optimistic.
Guys, we just got the best tweet and the funniest tweet we've ever gotten. This is from Pete Lawrence at Pete. Oh, you must know John at Pete Law. And he said, guys, we need to wrap this up. I need to go to bed.
We got Pete to take care of us.
Yeah. All right.
Damn, it's 11:30. If we do this the next 6 nights, we could turn this into Roots. Only I think Roots was each episode was 2 hours long, wasn't it, John? You're old enough.
Yeah,
to
those miniseries were great.
Oh yeah, I loved Roots and North and South. I wasn't a big Shogun fan or whatever it was, but I liked Roots.
Yeah, Shogun.
All right, let's wrap this up. So, at Pete Law can go to bed. We apologize, Pete, for keeping you up so late. I don't think we were planning on doing it this long, but Jeremiah got to talk as much as he does in a typical show. It's a half hour long, so we apologize to Jeremiah.
All good, man.
All right, guys.
Jeremiah had to wait the 2.5 hours to get his time in.
Yeah, Jeremiah took like 3 25-minute naps while we were on this show anyways. All right, guys. Make sure you check out thegruelingtruth.com. Check out mybookie.ag. Make sure you definitely check out our friends at the Retired Boxers Foundation, Alex Ramos and Jackie Richardson. Make sure you go rate us on iTunes, TuneIn, Spreaker, wherever you can rate us at. Make sure you download the app on the iTunes store. I want to thank everybody for listening. Me and Jeremiah will be back tomorrow at 11 o'clock. We'll have the Sheridan Report tomorrow at 2 o'clock. Survive in Advance with myself and Steve Risley tomorrow at noon. And make sure you follow us at The Grueling Truth or at TGTN Boxing. And you can send us any kind of questions or comments all day long up until tomorrow night through during the show. Ask us something. We'll put it on air as long as it's not nasty or inappropriate. And if you're listening, you know who you are because there are like 7 of you tonight. So we're going to go ahead and wrap the show up. Remember, you can hear us on iHeartRadio, iTunes, TuneIn, Spreaker, Stitcher, Spotify, wherever you find sports podcasts, you'll find The Grueling Truth. So for John Einreinhofer, Jeremiah Preisser, I'm Mike Goodpaster. You've been listening to The Grueling Truth, where the legends speak.